Hey, hello, welcome, welcome. This is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. I am Cole, and that is Jay, and we're back.
Hello.
We're on a pretty good schedule lately. Getting some weeks in a row going here, and we're back with Breaking Away, which was something I'd thought about for a long time of maybe trying to fit in at some point, just because it's kind of really different from. It's funny, we've done the show for 4 years. We've done over 100 episodes and well over 100 movies, something like 109, 110 movies. And yet I still think like this one's different from all of them. Probably because the point of the show again was like to sort of avoid various cliches and things that were well known or things that just didn't have much depth to them. And on the surface, this is a movie. It's like you could say it's a sports movie, although it's still different from like a lot of those team sport movies that all sort of follow a pattern. This does to a certain extent too, in that it sort of does end with like, sort of like the big game or the big meter or the big race or whatever, and overcoming that. But the lead up is a lot different, I think, than a lot of the movies that would follow. It was 1979. There certainly had been sports movies before, but sports movies became kind of a big thing in the 80s, I kind of think. I mean, Rocky came out in 76 and had sequels that stretched well into the 80s. And then, yeah, the 80s had some pretty big sports movies, like what was it, like Hoosiers.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big one, the basketball one. There's definitely more than I'm blanking on.
Longest Yard, maybe?
No, that's 70s.
Oh, what are you're doing 80s? Okay.
Yeah, I was doing 80s because I was going to say, well, I mean, obviously there was in the 70s too. I was just thinking, yeah, like it got kind of to be a big thing in the 80s, but now I'm kind of blanking on what other sports movies. I can think smaller ones like the hockey movie Youngblood was like 86. I don't think that set the world on fire, but it was a hockey movie that was like not as underground as some of the previous hockey movies had been. Although in the case of Slapshot was so good it sort of transcended. Like even people that like weren't into that, like they know Slapshot because it became sort of a classic. And that was another movie I thought about maybe doing on the show if we wanted to do something sports wise, but I didn't want to turn any show into a big hockey thing because I'm a big hockey fan. And I just think the thing about Breaking Away was like this is the first time I've seen it all the way through, but I've seen parts of it on TV before, come on some movie channels. I thought I taped this off TCM. It turns out I taped this off Hollywood Suite, which is I don't know if it's in the US or what, but here it's actually like a set of like 4 channels, and it goes 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Although the 70s channel shows pretty much anything older, 70s and older, so sometimes you'll have like 60s, 50 movies on there anyway. But anyway, that's what I wound up taping it off. And I just remember seeing a scene or two of it and then like kind of looking it up and then finding out sort of about its history and its reputation. And I found out one thing, like if you look up, like if you type in like underrated movies and you look for lists and stuff, this movie has a large presence on those lists. It also comes there as like feel good movies and inspirational movies. And that's another reason why I thought it would be sort of cool to do, because we've done like lighter toned movies before, like maybe a Wes Anderson or something like that. But they still have like their elements of sort of like serious drama to them. I kind of like the idea of doing something that's just sort of not that serious, but also kind of uplifting, which is, one of the main takeaways people have from this movie is like, there's, like just a really sort of like a sunny, sort of, sort of a light, sunny movie that makes you feel good. And again, there's lots of movies out there that have that sort of thing going on in them, but I don't think they're necessarily suitable for the show that we do, because it's just like, But I thought there was enough in this that made it kind of unique that we could take a stab at it anyway, just because, yeah, I just thought it would be an interesting sort of departure from a lot of the stuff that we do. Although, again, the way we do the show, we try to do it so that, the movies do stand out from each other and we're not always slogging through the same stuff. But, yeah, so that's what it came to. So, yeah, it's funny. So this is the first time I've seen it all the way through, although it turns out I did see kind of most of it, piecing it together. Like, there were only a few scenes I'd really missed. So over the last 3 or 4 years, I must have caught it on TV a few times. It took me a while to catch it so that I could record it fully.
Yeah, this was the first time watch for me, and I'm glad I finally saw it because I've heard people talk about it for years and years. And I was kind of caught off guard by the tone, honestly. Like, it's kind of all over the place. I mean, not in a bad way, just like you've got these kids fighting each other. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but you got the kids fighting each other, and you got the other kid, having a relationship with his father, and it's kind of, it's all over the place in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. I think that's one of the reasons why it holds up and has more depth and is something that we can talk about, because it doesn't necessarily follow all the same beats, or and sometimes when it does, it still hits them in sort of a different way. Like for instance, the whole thing about the father and the parents. Like when they're first introduced, you're like, okay, they're like here for comedic purposes. They're like,
Right.
they're gag characters. They're comedic props. But as the movie goes, they're revealed a little bit more, and it does play into sort of like his father's past, and his relationship with his son and expectations and all that kind of stuff, which works out really well.
It really makes you like dislike the father, right? Like, I mean, halfway through the movie, like, God, this guy's an asshole, and when he's talking about his son, not him being ashamed whenever he looks at him and stuff.
Yeah, he
Like, man,
seems awfully hard on him, but as it
unlikable.
goes, you do
Yeah.
you find out a little bit more about him, and
Right.
that he's not such a bad guy and stuff, and
Right.
so yeah, I kind of like that evolution. It's a nice arc. I like his friends a lot. I almost wish they even had even more screen time. And that's one of the things I like, is I really like that group of friends. And I don't know about you, but like this is the youngest I've ever seen Daniel Stern or Dennis Quaid. So I got a huge kick out of seeing them that young, because I probably the first movies I saw with them, they were, at least 5 or 6 years older than this, maybe even more. I don't know. So I get a big kick out of it, especially Daniel Stern. It's like Daniel Stern was ever this young. It's crazy.
Yeah, he looks so young. I think he was 21. I think Dennis Quaid may have been like 24.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid, man, you can tell that guy's voice from a mile away.
Right. And he has a few times where he makes an expression that you recognize from like later movies, where he sort of like sets his jaw and gets serious. It's like, yeah. It's weird seeing it on a younger face. But yeah, I get a big kick out of that. And of course, Jackie Earle Haley was an actor who was, he was like a child actor.
Yeah.
He'd done some stuff in the 70s, and it's the end of the 70s. He's a bit older now. And so it's sort of par for the course for him as far as that goes. But then like the work would sort of dry up for him through the 80s. By the early 90s, he had done very little. I think maybe he realized it was over when he was in the film Nemesis, which I watched kind of recently, which is a low budget sci-fi movie starring that French kickboxer guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a poor man's Van Damme. I can't remember his name. He was actually a legit kickboxer, but he did a lot of low budget action movies in the 90s and 2000s. Can't think of his name, but like the main thing he's known for was a series called Nemesis. They made at least 3 or 4 of them, and I watched the first one. It was actually a chore to sit through, but anyway, and that's like 93, and Jackie Earle Haley in that. And then after that, Jackie Earle Haley disappears for like 15 years
until he does
like Watchmen, which was great. And that was the first, like, I think for a lot of people, maybe my age, but maybe not, because I mean, depends on, I guess, the kind of stuff you watch. Like that was the first time I didn't know who Jackie Earle Haley was. He was this guy that had come out of nowhere who seemed just right for Rorschach. Like he had the gritty voice and the right size and stuff. And then I found out, he had been a child actor and he'd been gone for a long time. And that really, jumped, kind of a career renaissance for him, because after that they were like, we know what we can do with him. He's a really good character actor. And then he starts popping up in all sorts of things. He's in like Little Children or whatever it's called, which is really good. They tried to make him the new Freddy, which failed, which I don't think is his fault. I think it's just was a poor movie. It was not his fault. It's more of a script thing. I was fine with him as Freddy.
I agree. I agree with that.
And that's not me saying, he's just as good as Robert Englund. Like, no, Robert Englund's iconic and amazing and stuff. But I also buy into the fact that, if you're going to keep these movies going, you're going to have to use somebody else. And I was fine with Jackie Earle Haley. He seemed fine. He was not the problem with that movie. But anyway, we've discussed that kind of stuff in the past, talking about that. But, yeah. And then the lead guy is not a guy I know at all.
Dennis Christopher, is that it?
Yes, Dennis Christopher.
He a year after this movie, and I'm glad I watched this for this reason. I recently watched a movie called Fade to Black, and the year after he made this movie, he made the horror film Fade to Black, which is a really interesting film you might enjoy.
Well, yeah, what's funny is that showed up in my Twitter feed for something. Like it was one of those movie things I follow, and they showed a picture. And I was like, what is this? So I just like several days ago put Fade to Black on my watch list because I had never heard of it. Yeah. So isn't that funny how things line up? And yeah, I guess he was in Chariots of Fire.
Yeah,
which I've seen. I don't remember.
That was after this, I guess.
Yeah, just a couple of years after. So like another big sort of sports movie, although Chariots of Fire was certainly much more famous at the time. Breaking Away was one of those movies that, was very quiet, but then it's one of those sort of cult situations, right?
Was it? I thought it was pretty successful, just based on they did a
It was
series.
very well reviewed. Like Roger Ebert, I looked up his whole review of that. He's just bursting with praise for this movie. Some of it you can find in the Wikipedia article, but that's not even the whole thing. Like I read the whole thing, and it's just start to finish him gushing about how much he loved the movie. But yeah, I mean,
Because
it was very well received. You're right, because it had a short-lived TV series.
Yeah, with Jackie Earle Haley, I think was in that.
It did strike a chord. Oh, cool. But yeah,
I was just
funny.
thinking,
I'd never heard of Fade to Black. It sounds so interesting.
Hey, Jamie, what's going on? You think the sales of 10 speeds like went up dramatically? Like everyone's just like, oh fuck yeah, 10 speeds.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I mean, to this day, cycling is a more European thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that probably this movie did bump up its popularity over here a little bit, I'd have to say. There were probably people that were inspired by this movie. And we'll get into it too, because I mean, not cycling like that, but I mean, when I was a kid, like biking was just a huge part of my life. From like the ages of 7 to basically 17, like my bike was like, I did everything. Like I went everywhere on it. It was just part of who I was.
Oh, here we go.
There you go. But yeah, I loved my bike. It was, it was freedom. I mean, Ryan and I grew up on a no exit street, which meant it was pretty simple borders, basically the rule where our parents was, don't leave the street. And as we got older, we could get permission to leave the street. And when we do that, often we take our bikes, and that's how. So I was like in my, early teens and stuff, or even younger, maybe 11 or 12, It was such great freedom to leave the street on our bikes and, go to the video store and stuff like that we would do.
Did you have a BMX?
I did for a little while. My main bike, though, was a bike that I got when I was 12, when I was in grade 7. It's funny, the whole time I was in junior high, I don't think I went to any dances except for like maybe the first ever dance when I was in grade 7. Maybe it was just to experience it. I went to the dance, and they had like a raffle or a draw or something for a bike. And a friend of mine won the bike, but he was a sort of wealthy kid, and he already had a better bike. So he sold me the bike that he won for like a sort of better price. And yeah, that was a CCM XL. And that was like my main bike throughout my teens. What was great was the street I grew up on, it wasn't just Ryan. I had several friends, and a couple of them kept the bikes just sort of outside in their yards. And I remember, it was almost like a rideshare thing. Like we had a friend named Robbie, and they had a few different bikes, and I would just go down. They had a bike that was called, I have no idea what brand it was or anything like that, but it actually had a name like on it, and it was called the Blue Angel, and it was this beautiful, really light bike that was blue that I absolutely adored because it was so light I could do tricks on it. And I used to take that all the time. I would go down without it. I'd always just return it right back to like the back where his driveway was. But yeah, and we had a dirt road, so we did a lot of weird stuff on the dirt road. So yeah, biking was a really big part of my life. And, the whole time I've lived in Halifax, my adult life, I've lived in Halifax for about 17 years full time, and I've never owned a bike. And it's like the main thing I think about all the time is like how much I miss it. But Halifax to me is a terrible place to own a bike. Like,
really?
Well, all of downtown is a hill for one thing. And there's just so many intersections and stuff. Like, I just feel like I would be stressed out biking here. Like, I would only be happy going, to places like Point Pleasant Park and stuff like that. And the other thing, of course, was money. I'd have to save up. Not that I couldn't afford one, but I was just, it always just got pushed aside. There were probably a few times where I was like, yeah, I'm going to save up and buy a bike. And then, I wound up doing something else with the money. Now it feels too late in life to even bother. But I'm always looking wistfully at bikes because a lot of people, despite the fact that I think Halifax is a shitty place to own a bike, a lot of people do. I'm always passed by people on bikes. The building I live in, down in the garage, there's all sorts of bikes all over the bike rack and stuff. But I don't know. But yeah, watching this movie, it just makes me wistful for that. It seemed like where they shot it seemed like a great place to own a bike, which was something about Sydney, where I grew up. Sydney was really good to have a bike in, just the way the city was set up. It was I don't know. We used to go all over Creation. It was great. But Halifax is a bigger city with a lot more traffic and stuff, and I think it would just be, I think it would stress me out. Because I never, like, for all the times that I did bike, like, I mean, I wasn't one of those kids that just plowed down on the sidewalk. But at the same time, I know I didn't totally follow the rules of the road. And at the time, it wasn't the worst thing. But nowadays, if you ride a bike, you basically have to drive like you're a car. And I don't know if I could do that. I think that would stress me out. Like, I see guys like getting up in front of cars, like waiting in the intersection for the light, and they're right up. I don't want to do that. I don't want to ride a bike like it's a car because it's not. I think that would make me really worried. And like, either I'm going to run over or they're just going to lay on the horn at me all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So that's another one of the reasons why, like, yeah, I never actually pulled the trigger on getting a bike since coming up here to live, but I miss it all the time. Because it was something I was good at, too. I learned how to ride in one day, which I think is pretty good. Because, I mean, I knew kids that had to use training wheels and stuff for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I guess part of it is, like, just not having much fear. Like, I was used to falling anyway, so falling didn't mean anything to me. Like, some kids, they fall off the bike and it makes them really gun-shy. Like, I don't want to go through that. I didn't care. I was like, okay, I'll keep doing this.
At that age, man, it took, like, you can handle anything, If I fell down now, I would be seriously hurt, like, for a while.
Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, I didn't care getting cuts and bruises and stuff. And some of them were bad. Actually, something really bad happened to Ryan, which is so weird when you think about it. When we were younger, Ryan had a gravel driveway. He hasn't had one for millions of years. When we were younger, he did. And one time, we weren't even doing anything. Like, we were just going to get on our bikes to go. And he, like, got on his bike, and he, like, immediately fell off somehow. Like, he wasn't going fast to do a trip. He was, like, just starting to get on the bike. But he fell off, and he fell and his hand went down like that. And what's weird is, so it's a gravel driveway, and a rock went, like, right into his palm. But it was not a sharp rock. It was, like, super smooth. It was so weird. Like, the force just drove, like, this rock about this long, all smooth and round and oval-shaped, like, right into his hand. I remember that. Like, his hand was messed up for a while. I remember I'll have to ask him what game it was. Like, after that, like, there was some game he'd, like, either just bought or rented that he wanted to play a lot in Super Nintendo. And he had to play it funny because he couldn't hold the controller right. Wow. But he was so dedicated to playing the game that, he figured out a way to hold the controller. Remember that. But it was just so weird. It was just like this smooth rock. It wasn't sharp or jagged or anything. But, yeah.
Yeah, man, I've got an even worse freak story than that. One of my best friends, when we were maybe 10 years old, we were going from his house to my house, just a block or so away. And a car, like, came really close to us. It drove by and knocked me off my bike, and I fell onto him. And it caused his he had, like, an Indian cycle. I think it was a 10-speed. It drove the handlebar into his thigh.
Ooh.
Like, he could have died because it went in between two of the major arteries there. And, drove it, this far into his thigh.
Jeez.
He had to have major surgery, and it was a big time problem for him. But it's crazy, man.
Unless I can't remember, because I can't remember them all because there were so many. But for all my, like, wipeouts and stuff, I don't think I ever had a collision with anybody. I don't think I ever banged into anybody or anyone banged into me. Or if they did, it wasn't where I recovered or something.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly I just remember is, like, doing crazy stuff. So, like, the no exit street we lived on is kind of like downhill when you start. It's almost like living in a little valley, and sort of like up above that, the street running there is sort of like the main thing. And a lot of the south end of Sydney where I lived, that area was dominated by a large hill, a very big hill that, there were houses all the way up and down on called Hardwood Hill. So I remember I used to, like, take my bike, like, pretty far up the hill and, like, do stupid things, like seeing, like, how fast I'll go before I'll try to, like, brake and stuff like that. Like, really dangerous, stupid stuff. But I never, like, flew out into traffic, luckily, or anything like that. But there are a few times I would just, like, let it go and be like, let's see how much speed I can build up. Pretty crazy stuff.
But, we had this, and I think there may have been a few other films around this time where, like, 10 speeds were really big. But then in the 80s, it was all about BMX. We had
it was E.T. that did that, by the way.
Is that right?
Movie. It was E.T., which came out in 82. They had, like, these whole... I remember reading an article just a few months about it. It was kind of funny, too, because it's about one of the things that's sort of forgotten about the movie because they never got much credit, was the fact that, like, the way the scene was written about, how when they're, towards the end when they're all on the bikes trying to get away, and they're writing the scene, when they did bring... I can't remember how there was some like bike shop that they basically got made a contract with to like supply the bikes to them, right? And the bike shop had some kids, like some younger kids, like 19, 20, something like that, who were semi like professional BMXers, like back when that was like just first becoming a thing, right? And so they had one of those kids on set as sort of like a consultant. So when Spielberg or whoever like talked through how like that scene was supposed to go, the kid, he was not like a kid, but he's like 19. He said, "Your actors are not going to be able to do that. You need somebody that's actually trained." Because originally he was just going to use the actors like that we see, like no stunt doubles, right? And he's just like, "There's no way those kids can do that." So like, yeah, for that whole scene, those kids are being doubled by that guy and his friends, like in the long shots, whenever they're doing like the sort of tricks and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't think they were ever really given full credit or anything like that, but. Anyway, after that movie came out, like the bikes they used, the demand for them went through the roof. Like they couldn't make those bikes fast enough. Like, because I guess kids that saw the movie were like just astonished by how awesome the bikes were and them doing the moves and stuff. So I think that was kind of the start of it. Was that movie, which is funny because the movie is not about that. It's just something that happens in the movie, but it became kind of a little phenomenon. And I don't think you would have a movie like Rad without that, which is pretty cool. But you can probably find the article somewhere. It was a really interesting article where you talk to.
Oh, you know one we're leaving out?
What's
Quicksilver.
That? I've never seen it, but yeah.
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah,
Kevin Bacon. Yeah, he's at 10 speed in that one. I pulled up a list here. I didn't pull that on my own. BMX Bandits I've got on VHS, but I've never seen. That's 83, so just like you're saying, right after ET.
Yeah.
And I guess
I really think it was ET that sort of kicked things off, even though it was a sci-fi family movie where bikes were not really an important part, but a lot of people were really impressed by the bike riding in that movie. They're like, I want a bike like that.
Well, I mean, hell, Spielberg still uses the logo, so.
Yeah, that's true. That I mean, the flying bike part is the iconic part. I mean, obviously, I don't think any kid saying I want the bike because I know it will fly. Who knows? But yeah, this movie was shot in the summer of '78 in basically the locations where it's set. It's not one of those movies where they make up a place or have something set somewhere else. Like it's in Indiana. It's in what is it? Bloom something.
Oh,
Bloomington, is it? Is it Bloomington? Yeah, Bloomington. Yeah, it was. Yeah, filmed in and around Bloomington, Indiana, in the summer of '78, and of course the actual Indiana University there, which is a big part of the movie too. So this is another thing personally. So I don't know because we've seen this in other movies too, in other stories. The idea of like a university town. And there being sort of like a conflict between the kids that come from other places and go to the university, and then the kids that just grew up in the town and are still there and not going, the conflict between them and like, usually they call them townies, right? So, I mean, I know that's a thing, but I mean, maybe it's just because of where I am. Like, I don't know what you consider Halifax. I think Halifax is a college town because Dal is a really big university. It's the biggest one in Atlantic Canada. It has an enrollment of like over 14,000. And then like the other one is St. Mary's. And then there's various smaller ones like where I went, King's, which was technically King's is its own thing, but it's very small. It was basically like an extension of Dal practically. It was just this little dot on Dal's campus. And then you have various, community colleges. NASCAD is the arts college and a few things like that. But anyway, all I know is like, so obviously when I came up here, I was not a local. I was here for university. But I mean, I never knew who was or wasn't, like I couldn't tell the difference if I was out somewhere with my friends or by myself. Like I didn't know if I saw people my age, if they were Dal students or St. Mary's students, unless they were wearing paraphernalia. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and I didn't know if they weren't. Like I would have no idea who like a townie would be, and now I know maybe Halifax doesn't totally fit that bill because it's not as maybe rural, but I don't know. But I mean, that's a thing we used to always see. And in the movies, they always know. Like the university kids always know who the townies are and vice versa. And I don't know how. I get how if you go to their campus, but I mean, I don't know. But I mean, they're like running into each other out in public and they know. And I don't know. It's kind of weird, but.
Cutter.
Yeah. So of course in this movie they use the term cutter, which was real, except it
Mu-
was stoner because it's from
Much better
stone
than
cutter.
Stoner.
But the makers of the movie realized, well, maybe for your little area, stoner makes sense, but for the rest of the world, stoner has a different meaning. So we'll go with cutter, which is pretty funny. But yeah, literally referring to the main industry, which was stone cutting for various things, including building the university. That's not the movie. That's actually true. That is something that happened there, and that's why the quarry that's there is real too. It says on the Wikipedia page that the quarry is on private property and they like keep people out, which is really unfortunate. So the movie reality is better because that would be an awesome place to go and hang out with your friends. But in real life, it couldn't be done. And I understand why if it was private property, they want to keep people out, liability. They don't want people getting drowning or anything like that. But it was a really cool place. I was really impressed by it, and especially that it was just right there. Like they didn't have to go shoot elsewhere. Maybe that was part of the plot, though. Maybe they knew that going in. But anyway, really cool quarry. But so they call them cutters. But I mean, that is something that is interesting as the movie goes forward, because of course you have him and his friends and how they're sort of looked down upon by the college kids and called cutters. And I don't think it bothers all of them. It obviously really bothers Mike. That's Dennis Quaid's character.
Right.
Who has a big chip on his shoulder about how he was like a high school football star, but he never really got to carry it over to the next level. So he says like he wouldn't want to, even if he could, he wouldn't want to play college football, but obviously he would if he could. And he fixates on. He also says an interesting thing that foreshadows that funny Matthew McConaughey line from Dazed and Confused, because Matthew McConaughey has that line about how he loves hitting on the high school girls. He loves how every year he gets older, but they stay the same age, which is basically the same thing except a very different context. Is what Mike is saying about how annoyed he was by all these college kids, because he said, they'll never get old or out of shape because every year there's new ones, and I'm still here watching them. So it's kind of an interesting sort of inversion of that, and of course it predates it by quite a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They say that Daniel Stern's character played basketball, but then he just stopped for some reason, or that he wanted to get a scholarship, but he didn't get it, or something like that. Something like that. His character is Cyril. But yeah, I like the characters because they do all have their traits that at first makes them seem maybe stereotypes. But I think as the movie goes forward, they're revealed to be a little deeper than that. Jackie Earle Haley is Moocher, or Mooch. Daniel Stern is Cyril, Dennis Quaid is Mike, and our main character is Dave. And they've all sort of got their traits and quirks. But I think, there's just a few, even some short scenes with some dialogue between them where they each sort of kind of reveal what it is they kind of want out of life. And of course, the main thing about this movie is sort of like small town malaise and being in that age of maybe not having direction, which I think most of us can relate to. I mean, for me, it came a little later. When I was 19, my life had great direction. Like, my life was super on track when I was 19. Maybe it's never been as on track. I was in my second year of university. I'd already had work as a reporter. Things were going pretty well when I was 19. I was more at loose ends a couple short years after that. But I mean, I get it. So you have these guys that had graduated from high school the year before, and they hadn't really done anything since. In Dave's case, they say like the parents, he asked for the year off and his parents just gave him the year off. But now they're getting a little impatient with him and saying, well, what are you going to do if you're not going to go to college? You're going to get a job. And the whole thing with his father starts. And his father is pretty relentless on him in the first half, but they do change over time.
Yeah, right around there, like it was when Mike was talking about how his father liked to see him fail and bought him a guitar because he knew he'd never play it and stuff like that. I was like, so this movie's all about like fathers that don't want their kids to be any better than they were. They're almost
right.
Like jealous. What, are you going to get a diploma and wave it in my face?
Yeah, I know.
You give me some goddamn American French fries.
Yeah, of course. So we'll get to the other thing. So the movie, of course, comes without. And what's interesting about the movie is it doesn't show us how it started. They just reference it. Like usually when we have a character that becomes like enamored or obsessed with something, we usually see how it starts. This movie, we don't. He's already in the middle of it. They just refer. They're like, oh, you've been into this ever since you won that bike. Like he won this somehow. We don't even know how he won it, but he won the bike, which is a very nice Italian sort of like racing model. And then boom, he decides to get fully into that and becomes an Italiophilia. itaphilia, which is, what it sounds like, having a love for all things Italian and Italian culture. And he's driving his father nuts with it.
It is weird, though.
It is weird. He takes it a little far.
Papa.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's speaking like broken Italian throughout the house and playing various Italian music, which
Pavarotti, I think, at one point, wasn't
it? This movie has a very sort of bouncy, uplifting soundtrack of lively Italian classical music runs throughout. It's nice. But yeah, that was what's his name? That was actually Cyril saying about how his father wanted to fail. Cyril is the funniest character in the movie. That's why I like him. Daniel Stern was funny even back then. I like it. He's saying when Dave mentions how there is this university placement exam or something like that, right? Like just to see if you could qualify. He's like I don't know if I want to go to college, but I want to see if I can just pass the test, just to see if I could do it. And they were already having this conversation about. Yeah, that thing like you said about like the guitar and how he just wanted to see him fail and stuff like that. And he goes, "Hey, I should take it too and flunk. My dad's birthday is coming up." That was funny. It was, the bicycle, the model is a Mossy. So there you go. Just checking into that. But yeah, he does carry it a little far, but I don't know. I find him still a pretty likable character because it's just somebody showing enthusiasm for things in life, which I like. And he does feel a certain amount of pressure, but he's just trying to be himself, express something I think everybody can relate to, but is always magnified, it seems, in sort of these small town situations. As I said, that was one of the things that made me hesitant to tell people when I was growing up that I wanted to be a writer. And it's one of the reasons why I sort of went into journalism, because I felt like eventually people wanted me to say something more practical. So I came up with journalism, because if I said write, they would just sort of stare at me blankly and be like, what do you mean? So eventually I was just like, like a reporter. And that's what I wound up becoming. Not that I hated it or anything like that, although I didn't love it. But that's really what it was, because I don't know, where I was from, people would talk about like getting a good job, which just sort of meant, steady. That's all they really meant, was something steady. It didn't matter if you liked it or what it actually accomplished in society. It was about it being steady. And, I'm not going to look down on any of that, especially in the world economy we have nowadays. People, all sorts of people working jobs they don't like because they need something. You need a job. You need to get by. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about being that age where you're trying to think about what you want to do with your life, and people are all trying to steer you in a different direction than how you feel. And that's got to be pretty tough. Because, I get it, especially when you want to do something like, I want to be a rock star. Well, good fucking luck, man. That happens, but it happens to like this percentage of the people that try. But in this case, he's not saying like he necessarily wants to be a cyclist. It's just something he really likes. Being a cyclist would be a pretty tough thing. But who knows? He's ridiculously talented, as the movie shows. Like, he's really good. No one has taught him. It seems he's just done this all on his own. For the race at the end, which, by the way, is a real race that happens every year there at the university, the Little 500, he does, like, it goes in team. It's 200 laps around, and there's teams of 4. So, you could make it very even. You could have each guy do 50 laps, but I'm sure it does but anyway, he does like well over 100 laps. In fact, the story is based on a real guy that had won the Little 500 back in the 60s. And when he did it, obviously, again, he competed with a team, but he personally completed 134 of those laps himself. Wow. They used him as a consultant for the movie, and he's the guy who and he's the voice, he's the announcer who's announcing the race at the end. Just check his name here. His name was David Blaze. So that's why our character's name was Dave.
That's a cool name to have for a bike rider.
Yeah, Blase. But yeah.
The guy was actually like studying Italian. He went that far, and he meets a girl he likes and pretends like he is Italian. He does the accent and everything.
Right.
Scusi.
And it's so easy, like usually in like a different sort of movie, it's like, okay, scumbag move, because it's like we all know the girls like are into foreign guys, right? And Italian, woo, they really like that. It's very romantic, right? But the truth is, I don't even know if he can control it at this point. It's become so, so it becomes so part of him, and now he really does like the girl. And you realize what it is again. She's a college student, and he's just some local bum kind of by comparison. So he has to like create something. So he's like, oh yeah, I am a student here, and I'm a foreign exchange student. So you do get it to a certain extent. And I understand how it just sort of gets away from him. He probably didn't mean for it to go as far as it did, and it just sort of happened. Like, I get stuff like that. I mean, sometimes you have movies where characters tell ridiculous lies and they keep going, and and a lot of it's sort of hard to relate to because I'm like, I would never do that. In his case, I'm not saying I would because I don't think I would, but I get it a little more. In other movies, it's really ridiculous. In this one, I get it, and I'm more sympathetic, and I'm glad that she does forgive him. Because I get where it's coming from. I don't think he's just like, I'm going to, this hot chick, this is the best way to get into her pants. I think it really comes from like him having a lot of insecurity, again, about who he is and who she is.
That's a good point. It's not just about, crushing Poon. It's he actually likes this girl.
Exactly.
Do you think he would have come clean if he wasn't, sabotaged by the Italians that he loves so much?
Yeah, that is a good point, too. Because maybe not. Because that's where the movie turns. Is like he gets totally disillusioned by an actual encounter with real Italian cyclists. Because throughout the whole movie, he held up the Italians as this great ideal, and it turns out they're just as big jerks as anybody else. In fact, they're even worse. They practically kill him just for the crime of being able to keep up with them. And of course, these guys don't represent all of Italy, but still, think about it. You're small town America. You've got all these posters on your wall, and you're learning Italian and all this stuff. So now, real Italian cyclists, the guys you look up to the most, come, and they're just a bunch of dicks. So so he's so that's where, of course, where the movie turns, where all of a sudden that enthusiasm goes down the drain. He has to drop the Italian stuff, which he does with his family and her, and it's interesting when he comes back too, because it's the first time. It's also the first time his father becomes a little bit sympathetic, really, because before that, so his father had been one of the stone cutters or whatever that he worked at the quarry when he was younger, and now that he's older, he has a used car dealership, and there's a part where I don't know, a customer is unsatisfied bringing back a car that he made some sort of guarantee about, and it didn't work out, and they were upset with the car, and they were trying to return. And he was going to like, no, and they were like, you gave me your word, and he's like, yeah, but legally I didn't write anything down, so he's using that. But his son is there because he's working a little part time on the lot at the time. And he's just like, hey, if you promised him, you should keep your word. And he basically winds up, giving him. Basically forcing him to give him a refund, which also coincides with him having some sort of like mild heart attack or something like that, right? It was pretty funny. But then, so his father, refund. At one point, he turns to his son and he goes, "Who are you?" Because he can't believe his own son would do this to him. But anyway, so he's sort of like in recovery of that while his son is doing the first race, which is not the end Little 500. It's just some sort of different race. It's not on a track, and it's just for some exhibition thing. And the Italians come, and of course they dominate. They get out front of everybody easily. He works really hard to catch up with them, and he's trying to speak to Italian with them, but they're actually really annoyed that he's there, and then they sabotage him and cause him to wipe out very violently. But anyway, so then when he comes back home, and he's all disillusioned and upset now and has dropped his Italian thing, he apologizes to his father. He says, I'm sorry about giving that guy's money back. I really am. He's like, I didn't realize, but everyone cheats. Now what he's saying is, I get it, Dad. You have to cheat to do this. And I like what his dad says. He says, well, now you know. So it's a little sort of coming of age, growing up moment there. And it is kind of sad. But at the same time, even though it is weird, it seems like a weird time to gain sympathy for the father, because all he's saying is like, well, now you know that I have to be kind of a jerk the way I run my business just to get by. But I don't know. For some reason, that is where it changes, and that's where I do start to sympathize with the father, because he's just like, yeah, now you know a little bit more about the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking
Everybody
dreams.
Which
I don't know. I mean, considering how it ends, I think it is an uplifting movie. So I wouldn't go as far as breaking dreams. It has those moments, but I think it's it ends on a high note. It's an uplifting movie, which is what a lot of people like about it. It's just sort of a sunny, happy movie with it.
Dave is in college. Is he at Indiana University?
Yeah, he's at the
local school. Okay,
yeah.
And then is Mike? What's Mike do?
Yeah,
Mike's doing something, right?
we don't actually get any sort of epilogue on all the characters, which is too bad.
Mike's
Like,
just going to be a career alcoholic.
yeah, it's clear that Mike's just going to be like the
Mike's,
bitter local alcoholic that hangs out at the football field.
he has a chip on both shoulders, I think.
Yeah, I feel bad about Mike. The worst part is like, so what's funny, and again, like you said about how like the movie's sort of all over the place tone wise, because sometimes it can be really light and funny, and other times it gets weirdly serious, which makes sense because it makes it feel more real. Which is one thing I like about the characters in the movie, because they do feel like real characters, like real people to me, because they're not all just like one way. Again, all four of them, the four friends, they do have their defining traits, but that's not the whole thing they are. And what's interesting about Dave, yeah, it is Dave, right? Yeah, how quickly I lose their names, but yeah, Dave is like, remember when they're doing the final race and he's killing it. He hasn't even come in for a lap. He hasn't even come in for a switch, right? And then this time by nobody's fault, he just happens to wipe out and he gets hurt and it puts them behind. So then his friends have to jump into it and they're, not great at it. But by the time Mike is on the bike, Mike does a pretty good job. And the announcer even says like, after Mooch hadn't done that well and the other one, because you get it, they're not as athletic. They just did the best they could. But Mike seemed to do pretty well. And like when he's coming in, Cyril says to him, we showed those shits, didn't we? And he goes, show them what? Like he yells at him because at this point, no, they hadn't won or anything like that. And he still had to get on the bike and do it. But I mean, aren't you happy that your friends are putting all this effort into something that really only you care about? Like, so he has this moment like where he's not, sunny and happy and positive at all. And you'd think he'd just be happy his friends are supporting him, but he instead screams, he goes, show them what? Because he's so caught up in the moment. Which, again, I don't think makes him a dick. It just shows it's more realistic. Like, he's caught up in the moment. He really wants to win. So, after it's over, he's going to thank them for everything they did. But in the moment, he's really caught up and he's really upset about how, he's fallen off and he's injured now. And if they're going to do this, he's going to have to finish injured. But it just means, you expect to be like, yeah, good job, Mike. But instead, he, turns and screams at Cyril. It's like, whoa. But, again, I think it just makes it a bit more realistic.
I felt really naive. Like I didn't know relay bike riding was a thing. Like I didn't know, like someone else hopping on the same bike. I didn't know that was a thing at all.
I knew it was a thing. I actually did not know about this event, the Little 500, but it's pretty cool. It's been around a long time, and they still do it. It's attended by more than 25,000 fans each April. Well, probably not last April, but yeah.
Yeah, they were all on their bikes at home on Zoom.
They're all on stationary bikes. Just, on Zoom.
But you could probably do that with the technology they've got on those things now.
Yeah, they have like odometer things, right, to say how far people went. It's not exactly the same. But the race was founded in 1951, so there you go, yeah. In March 2020, due to the COVID pandemic, the 2020 men's and women's Little 500 were canceled. Oh, yeah, there you go. So that was the only time it was ever missed, too.
Wow.
But let's see here. Eligibility. The student must be a full-time undergraduate student enrolled at Indiana University Bloomington campus. And, of course, that's what's going on here in this movie is that they're not normally eligible. And it's kind of weird. It's a weird thing. So after some hijinks ensue with his attempts to woo the girl and there's some misunderstandings. And, again, it shows how really laid back Cyril is and that, okay, we'll set it up. So he and Cyril go to the campus because he knows she's living at residence, so he can serenade her with an Italian song that he sings while Cyril plays the guitar for him. And one of the stupid girls is a real bitch about it because while they're all out watching, everyone's enjoying it. She's calling up the guy. She's calling up the girl's boyfriend, saying, "Do you know that there's a guy out here playing guitar and singing for her?" So he and a bunch of his friends show up, but by this time, Dave has already sort of escaped with her. So Cyril's just there with the guitar, and they jump poor Cyril, thinking he did it. And Cyril doesn't get mad or upset at anybody. And Mike is really mad. Of course, it makes sense because Mike wants an excuse to go after these guys anyway.
Right.
And Cyril's like, no, I don't know who they were. Let's just forget about it. But Mike is so gung-ho that he finally...
that's when they see him at the restaurant later, right? They're like, is this the guy? And he's like, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a restaurant. It's like what, like the cafeteria or
Well,
something like.
yeah, whatever you
It's
call it.
on campus, right? Because that's
Oh,
what
it
it
is.
is.
Okay.
Yeah, so they go on to campus.
Well, that's kind of stupid.
They go on to campus because, well, again, Mike wants revenge for them. So yeah, it is kind of stupid because you're not going to just get the guy. You're surrounded by enemies on all sides, and that's pretty much what happens. What's funny is like it's not Mike that initiates it though. It seems like Mike might even be ready to go because he realizes they're in a bad situation. But then one of them, and we had a warning for this earlier, so we'll call back to an earlier scene where it's like, hey, we're just going to be like, we're just going to loaf around. It's like, oh no, Mooch is like turning on us now because he actually got a job, and Mooch is going to go work at the local like car wash. And it seems, and they're all waiting in the car for him. It seems like he's committed. Yeah, okay, I'll do this car wash job. But then the boss guy calls him Shorty, and that is a trigger for Mooch. Mooch does not like being called Shorty, and he tells him to punch the clock. So he literally like smashes the clock and takes off. And so it happens again in the cafeteria. It seems like, okay. Oh, and at the same time, so it's only the three of them. So at this point, Dave is not with them, but he's there because he's with the girl, and I need to look up the girl's name. It's Catherine. So he's just there with Catherine, in his guise as the Italian foreign exchange student. When they show up looking for trouble, and there's a weird comedic part too, where they actually go into an on-camp. Well, I guess right next door they have their own bowling alley, and Cyril gets his fingers stuck in a ball, so he's carrying the ball with him around into the cafeteria. But anyway, it's like, is this him? It's like, yeah, I don't know if that's him. But anyway, they realize they're outnumbered and out everything, and they're gonna go. But then one of them. And it's even Mooch himself that says, like, let's go, guys. And he turns, and then the guy goes, you better go, Shorty. Well, you don't say Shorty to Mooch, because then he hauls off and punches him, and it turns into the brawl. With, of course, again, Daniel Stern, Cyril, like, swinging the bowling ball around at his foes. It's pretty funny. But,
yeah, it seems like a pretty effective weapon, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd stay back. Those things are heavy as hell. And of course, yeah, it's not like he wants to fight anyway. He's not a fighter. You can tell he's not that kind of guy, but he has to protect himself, and he has this ball. But anyway, so that all leads to the big brouhaha, and Mike's brother, who's that older brother, who's a local cop, shows up and breaks up. And anyway, they get out of there without really getting in much trouble. But like the students get in a lot of trouble, and they're called in by the dean or whoever, who scolds them and says, like, this whole rivalry with the Cutters or the Townies or whatever, like, this is not the way to do that. And he's like, I know. We're going to actually let a team, like of of those people, non-university students, compete at the Little 500. And the main jock jerk guy's like, but no, they're not good enough or something like that. It's like, you don't know that. But that's how they wind up being part of the Little 500. Because I was just reading eligibility, which says you actually have to be, you also can't just be like skating by. You have to have a GPA of at least 2.0. Student may only compete up to 4 times in a 5-year period. The student must be an amateur. Blah 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 blah. But yeah, long tradition. But anyway, I don't know if that ever actually happened in the actual history of it. But for the purpose of this movie, yeah, they open it up to the public or whatever, and the non-college team gets to compete, and they decide. By this time, they decide to own the whole Cutter thing, which we'll go back to and talk to, because this is another deep part of the movie when he has the conversation with his father, and they wear the T-shirts with Cutters. Doing a little light research on this, I very quickly found out that you can buy like official, like, whatever it is the cyclists wear, those clothes with Cutter on it. Like, that's a thing. So that's kind of cool. So I guess that's a good inside joke for cyclists or people in the know or cinephiles or whatever. But yeah, we can come back to that, I guess, since it is sort of the deepest part of the movie. Is, of course, so this is during the everything is bad period. The girl is really upset that she, sort of humiliated her, treated her like a fool. Because I get it, like nobody wants to be fooled like that. It makes you feel like an idiot. So she's mad, and he probably isn't going to compete. Plus, he lost his awesome bike. It got just pretty wrecked in that crash, and he's feeling bad about himself. And then he finally gets to talk to his father a little bit after what happened to his father. And this really is where the movie changes. But it works well too, because it helps explain the father's point of view a little better, because throughout the whole movie, we have the fact that he and his friends are really resentful of the fact that the college students look down on them and refer to them as Cutters, because the idea being, you're just your local townies, and Cutter is, your blue collar work or like that.
Right.
You don't Yeah, that's all you can do. To get better jobs, you had to go to college or like that. And of course, the whole point is, and it's funny that his father points it out. And there's a part where they're walking, and his father says, back when I was a cutter, it's funny because you see finally some of his sadness too, because now he's just a middle-aged whatever. And he says, I was young and slim and strong. He says, I loved it. He said, I liked the work that I did, and I was proud of it. And he said, and it was weird because we did all this work to put up the university, of cutting the stone for putting it up. And then even though nobody said anything to us, we didn't feel worthy of the buildings, even though we were the ones that built them. And he says, so he says, you and your friends still hang out at the quarry there? And he says, yeah, I guess so. And he said, well, isn't that interesting? Like the only part of the work I did that you are involved in is the hole we left, or something like that. But then he also says, so he explains how, he was proud of the work, that it was good, honest work, and it was hard to do. And there's an earlier part where he actually visits the place again and sees how they're doing it and sort of relives it, I guess, a little bit. And it wipes him out. It's like he can't do it anymore now. He's like middle-aged. But anyway, then Dave has this line, something about you're right. Like he says, you're right. Like I'm not ashamed to be a cutter. And his father goes, you're not a cutter. I was.
I'm a cutter.
And that's the whole thing, right? Like this whole idea, like you have this generation of the youth that are upset that they're looked down upon and referred to as cutters. And they're kind of missing the point that that's not even, they're not even the ones that did it. And that there actually is a dignity to being that. And they're missing that. Because then he says, like, all the fathers did it. Although he sort of trails off. He goes, well, Cyril's father, that's a whole thing or something like it. And we don't get to know what it is. But he says, like, all the fathers did it. But yeah, that's sort of like the irony, and sort of, I think, finally hits Dave, that they've been carrying this chip on their shoulder, and they didn't really even earn that. What they thought of as a derogatory term was actually something that shouldn't be derogatory, and the fact was it didn't even really apply to him because he wasn't a cutter. He didn't do that work, So it's sort of, I think, a somewhat impactful moment. It's somewhat profound. I like it, and it is, how the movie changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really touched by the moment he had with his father there at the end, when he was, devastated by his idols, basically made a fool out of him, made him, not be able to complete the race. And, he's like, forget them. And then his father, was like, oh, I just wanted you to be a little upset. I don't want you to be that upset.
Yeah, there's a funny line early in the movie too, where he's complaining about him running around and singing songs and stuff like that, and his mother says something about how he's happy, and he's like, he's 19, he should be miserable and tired,
right?
Like I was, or something like that.
Yeah, and then when he's working for him at his car dealership, he says, "How are you? You exhausted?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, get used to it."
Get used to it. Because part of the whole sort of North American blue collar thing. It's just like, this is it, you do your job and you're exhausted. Welcome to life.
You feel like shit, then you die. That's it.
Yeah.
Like you want your kid to be as miserable as you are.
Yeah. It's funny, but you're right. Yeah. So then, like he says, yes, he holds his father and cries, and his father is so taken aback. He has no way of responding. He goes, well, geez, I didn't want you to be this miserable. And he sort of finally does sort of start to get, because the other thing is too, how, okay, if I can cover a bit if you need a moment there, Jay.
No, it's fine.
Are you sure? I'm sorry if you put that up a while ago. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. Okay, we're good? Okay, no. Jay, I thought a while ago, Jay thought maybe he'd have to take care of something, but apparently not. So yeah, so I'm sorry for being oblivious to that. I got to be a little more observant of what's going on. But anyway, good. So we can carry on. But yeah, and the mother, she's just sort of almost sort of a typical mother. She's very supportive. She doesn't seem to think it's that bad that at 19 he doesn't necessarily have all that direction, because that's like a lot of people, and she's very supportive. I missed a bit because I read it somewhere else in like a review or something. Is it implied that she's pregnant at the end or something? Like I missed
the
that.
Mom, yeah.
I missed that.
It's very odd.
Because
Very,
like
very.
there's a line there, it says something like where apparently she's telling the others, and Cyril says, "Really at your age?" And then like the father interrupts and says, "That'll be the last thing you ever say if you finish that," or something like that. I don't remember that. I missed that twice because I watched the movie twice today, and I missed that. And I know it's a callback to earlier in the movie when he's talking about how they should be like Italians. He said, "Well, Italians have big families. I'm an only child. I think have another kid." And they're like, "What?" And I know that it's implied later that like while he's doing a race, they sort of have a romantic evening, and perhaps that's when they could conceive a kid. But I missed that both times I watched it, like them talking about her being pregnant. So that's kind of weird and out of left field. But it's weird that I missed it.
It was odd the way he worded it. He was like, and that I'd be a father, and your mother would be a mother, and that you would be a brother. It's like, what?
Yeah, that is weird.
That's what I thought too, and I didn't.
Yeah, I can't believe I missed that.
Child.
Yeah, I know, which is commented on, but I mean, it does happen. But yeah, I can't believe I missed it twice. I was just again, I was like reading some articles about the thing, and then they referenced it. I was like, what? How did I miss that? But yeah, it's kind of funny. But yeah, just on the Wikipedia part, it has the beginning. I know because I read the whole thing where Roger Ebert called it a wonderfully sunny. That's probably why I said sunny a couple times subconsciously. Funny, goofy, intelligent movie that makes you feel about as good as any movie in a long time. It is, in fact, a treasure. Movies like this are hardly ever made at all. When they're done this well, they're precious cinematic miracles. So, I mean, that's as high praise as you can get. And that's from a full article where he spends at least 3 paragraphs gushing. So, I mean, I like the movie too, not quite that much. But I mean, it is funny because he says like that's 1979. I think it's even more true now. Like movies like that aren't made now. And if they are, they're just like hackneyed like Disney Channel crap. What's good about this movie is like it has some of those cliches but I think it had at its core it's still a good movie. It's weird too. Like the movie is rated PG. It would probably be PG-13 now because of some of the lines. Like there's a part where they're driving by when they first drive by the campus, and Cyril looks out and he goes, "There's something about college that does something to the girl's tits," or something like that. Yeah. And you have a close up of him looking at some girl's breasts. When they say "goddamn" and "goddamn it" a few times. Apart from that, I think it's pretty much a movie you can watch with a kid.
I mean, you get to see Dennis Quaid hold a cigarette a lot. He never actually smoke it, I don't think, but he holds one.
And I mean, I'll come down on movies that are like have a ton of profanity when you don't need them and stuff like that. But I never think of profanity as like the worst thing that can happen to a kid. This is unrelated, but just like a few days ago, somebody showed up my feed. They might have something to do with comics. I don't know, because one of the comic people I follow retweeted it, and I don't know who they were, but they said how they were disappointed about how like they couldn't watch like Falcon and the Winter Soldier because they were upset about the swearing. And he said he like counted 4 of this or something like that. I'm like, really? You can't watch this with your kid because like 3 or 4 times they say shit or something like that? Like maybe you should be more concerned about the scenes where people are getting killed. But again, that's, it's weird how warped people are about that. Like we've talked about this before, like bad words and sex are like way worse.
Words, but you can have a body count.
No, exactly. I just don't get it. I really don't get it.
That seems worse to me, honestly. But
I know. And I'm thinking the swearing in Winter Soldier is so mild. Like you said, he thinks he counted like 4. Well, 4 in 2 episodes. Wow.
Yeah, does that crap and damn? I mean, what does that include? He's not saying fuck, right? I mean,
yeah, no, they won't ever. I think somebody did say shit at least once, which is a pretty strong swear for I guess something on Disney. But I don't know. But I mean, Falcon and Winter Soldier isn't for kids necessarily, at least like young kids. But I mean, if you have, a kid that wants to watch it and you won't let them watch it because of the mild swearing, I mean, really, I think that's dumb. Again, if you said, I don't think the kid is ready for this, there's some shooting in it and stuff like that, that I get. But just some swear words, who gives a shit?
It's PG-13, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, it must be.
Or TVMA, whatever it is.
Yeah, we got different ratings here sometimes, but
whatever it is.
Anyway, I couldn't believe like that he wanted to complain about that.
I can believe it.
Because I think he was. I don't know what. I'll have to look who it was. He might have been like an artist or a writer that had done comics, saying how he's disappointed that he couldn't watch this as a kid. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you could watch it with your kid. I'm pretty sure it will not warp your kid horribly. Like, I don't even know if they might notice. Like it's so infrequent. I don't know. I mean, it is true. In 1990, I saw the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, and Raphael said "damn" a lot, and I started saying "damn." I will cop to that, but I don't know.
Let's see, you would have been what, like
Yeah,
7 or 8?
yeah. And I get it. Damn is a strong word for that old. Like,
But you're gonna hear it other places.
I have an old memory of being around that age and like doing something that I don't know why I did it, but like it's funny. It's the bedroom. It eventually was my bedroom, but when I was a kid, my bedroom was a different room. We had this as sort of the spare bedroom. I went to the spare bedroom one day for no reason at all, and I found a present that somebody had wrapped up, obviously to give to. It was probably some present my mother had wrapped up to give to somebody for some occasion at some point, and she put it away. I was not this sort of kid, but for some reason, I decided to just open the present as if it was for me, even though I knew it wasn't for me. And it was, of course, I don't even know what it was, some like adult thing. My mother walked in on me doing this, and I didn't know she was there. And she was probably upset about that. But I actually said to myself, what in the hell? And my mother like flipped out that I said hell. I have that memory. She was like way more mad about that than me, like, without asking, just opening a present that was clearly not for me. Like, I have no idea why I did that. I was not really a bad kid, but I did that. I just, I was like, oh, I'll just open this present as if it's mine, even though I knew it wasn't mine.
You
I
want
don't
to
know
feel
what I was expecting to find.
you want to feel like an adult or something, right? Like it makes you feel older,
Yeah.
Like I learned all the best swear words from my friends, my peers.
Oh yeah.
Movies.
Oh, I mean, it's funny because like as adults now, like even my mother and father will swear. It's funny. I didn't hear my dad say the F word until like I nearly killed us. So I was learning how to drive, and like, and he was with me, and like we were coming up a street where you can only turn right, and I did turn right, but I did it with like way too much oncoming traffic coming in, like a car nearly plowed into us, and I zipped us over to the side. And it was an interesting thing because it wasn't like maybe the first fuck you think you might hear from your dad either. It was like we nearly died. He was like, fuck. It was that. That was his fuck. It wasn't him like yelling or damn or like fuck this, or it was him going fuck, because he was like probably literally shaking because he thought we were gonna die, which is pretty funny. But anyway, like I didn't know the word fart until like Ryan started saying it, because that my house was too highbrow for that. Like that was just not a word that would ever get said in my household.
See, what was one like sucks? Like my parents didn't like that. Like, oh, it sucks. It was like when Bart Simpson was saying it and stuff.
Yeah, which is weird because I found out like sucks has been around since like at least the 70s. Like my parents treated it like sucks was like this new phenomenon. It's not.
Well, it sucks dick, right? Is what it's implying. Like
I guess that's where I guess that's what people, but I never thought that originally, right? Like I never even thought about sucking. It was just a word, just the way cool was. Right. I've always thought this, and I'm sure I'm right. It's interesting how, of course slang has changed. You watch a movie from decades ago and it's like, look how silly they sound. They sound ridiculous, the things they say. And of course things change. And, now people say something fairly outdated. We're like, that's so 1995 or something like that. I don't think sucks and cool are going anywhere. Cool and sucks, I think, will always be there and always mean what they mean. I think they're so entrenched. Man. I don't think anything will replace them.
I think man has got to stay around. What are you gonna say? I mean, bro, dude, man, bro. Come on, that's my 3 go-tos.
Holmes.
Holmes, that's the new one.
Yeah. Hey, Holmes. Call everybody Holmes. Like not in like a casual way, but like in almost like in a formal way.
Like Turkey.
How are you today, Holmes?
Hey, hello, Turkey. How are you?
Jive Turkey, I like.
Yeah, bruh, that's the new one. Bruh. That's the kids on the video games that say that word.
Oh,
used to piss me off, bruh.
Not to go on a whole thing, but there's a few things out there that like, and I know this is how it goes because you're always criticizing the younger generation or something like that, but I don't even know when it started, but it's been around for maybe a year, maybe it was longer. I don't know, but I will never use it. And that is using the word thirsty to refer to like lusting after someone or like being horny. Like, fuck, you wouldn't believe how many goddamn articles I've seen where it's just like, it's like middle-aged moms are thirsty for, this actor or like that. I'm like, fuck, no, I'm not going to say thirsty. Yeah, I refuse that. I reject that.
Thirst trap. That's a big one.
Okay, yeah, that's related here.
Ones that are, trying to make people lust after them.
Yeah. Because I'm not saying I'm going to just keep talking like it's 1994 for the rest of my life, because that's, I will adapt, but there are certain things I will say no to, and I'm never going to use thirsty. Just fucking never. I don't even know that. I haven't
I
even
don't
heard
either.
that. It sounds
I'm
pretty
old
fucking
as fuck,
terrible.
dude. I don't know what that is.
It's supposed to mean the same thing, is it? Coomer. Well, wait a second. So, because they would say, because they would at least use thirsty the way it sounds like you would use it for something else, like you're thirsty for milk, but they would just say, you're thirsty for Dwayne Johnson. So would you say you're Coomer for them, or I need more? I need more information. But anyway, because usually the way I saw it, I was like, yeah, this gets them thirsty or thirsty for. Yeah. See, no, I get that. Yeah, I know that people say that. Thirsty for MILFs or thirsty for whatever. But I reject that. I will not say it. I hate it. I fucking hate it. But yeah, I think Coolin sucks. They will be eternal. Even in like 100 years from now. I don't know. And I'm not sure when they started. You have to go back to probably the 60s, maybe. People definitely didn't. Cool could even be 50s.
Coomer, person who lives or depends on the pleasure of orgasming multiple times a day, generally being a sad, degenerate person.
Okay. I mean, so they made a term for it, but it doesn't sound good.
Person who lives or depends on pleasure. I mean, normal people can. Well, I'm not gonna say it's not a part of my life.
Are you a sad degenerate if you masturbate sometimes? Oh God. Going to hell, Coomer.
Is it something like conjunction with boomer? I feel like you could put those together pretty well.
Maybe Coomer's like close to cum, maybe like Coomer. I'm trying my best here.
Good. Aiden's young as hell, so that makes me feel good.
Yeah. But I mean, the only reason I know thirsty is obviously I don't interact with people that say it. But again, it's something that pops up on like sites and things like that. Anyway, I reject thirsty. I will not use it. I will not. But anyway, yeah. So this movie has some mild swearing and a couple things, but I mean, I don't think it's a big deal. So nowadays, it probably will get a PG-13, but it's officially rated as PG, and I think that's fine. Of course, that's because PG-13 did not exist when this movie was first rated. PG-13 came in like 84 for the two Spielberg movie. Well, he was involved Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Gremlins. Those were the movies that originated the PG-13. And in Canada, it's always been PG-14.
Oh, okay.
We bump it up one. So
What's
it made getting into movies a little harder for me because I was always a young-looking kid, so it was harder to swing PG-14 than PG-13. I had some tough times at certain times. Usually they didn't care, but every once in a while I get scrutinized. And this is sometimes when I was 14, but you don't have ID when you're 14. So. At least I didn't.
What's the smoking age
in Canada?
Mm-hmm.
19. Same as alcohol. So that's another thing. At the opening scene of the movie, and they're talking about being adrift and how they're 19. Again, this is the 70s, so things have changed because the drinking age in the U.S. has gone up. But at the time, it was 18. So they say, in 18, you get to vote and smoke and drink. But it's like, what do you do when you're 19? But here, 19 is the tobacco and alcohol age.
I think it's 18 everywhere except for Alabama is 19. I know that because I was 18 and smoking, and I went there for vacation and I couldn't buy cigarettes. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's been a lot of talk about changing it to 21, which, fuck it. I mean, it's not going to stop kids from smoking if they want to, but smoking's so terrible for you.
I think smoking is 18 in Quebec. And I think drinking is 18 in like PEI or something. And maybe possibly Quebec too. I don't know. But we were the same. We were the same as the U.S. for a long time. In that in the U.S. and Canada, it was 18. And then at some point, we went to 19 and the U.S. jumped all the way to 21 for drinking.
Mm-hmm. I know for a while, this is before I was, close to this age, but it was 18 in Louisiana. So kids would always travel from where I live to Louisiana to buy alcohol.
I think 21's way too old, really. I mean, for drinking, I think that's too high.
I don't disagree. I mean, because they're going to do it anyway. They're going to find a way to get it. I mean, it's like we have these things called dry counties around here, like certain counties that don't have alcohol, like because of whatever.
Right.
But it's like we all drink. We're still going to go over here and get it, and just come back. You're not stopping anybody. You're just making it. You're losing the tax dollars and making us go out of our way. Like you're not.
I think drinking is fine at 18. I mean, I don't care that it's 19 in Canada. So 18 or 19 seems reasonable. 21 seems high. I mean, I've always known the drinking age is 21 in the US, but it's not something I usually think about. I remember years ago, my friend had bought like a CD that Jimmy Fallon put out back when he was doing comedy and stuff. And he had some of his, songs on there and some of his stand-up. And there was a stand-up thing where he's doing stand-up at a college campus. And there's a whole bit about fake IDs, and he's asking about fake IDs, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Because to me, it's kind of funny to think about being like in college and needing a fake ID. But then, I mean, it is true. My first year of college, I didn't turn because I have not a late birthday, but I mean, my birthday wasn't until April. So my first year of college, I spent most of it under the drinking age, which is true. But I mean, you could be in your second or third year of college in the U.S. and still, not be a drinking age, legal drinking age.
You know what? I'm wrong. It actually has nationally. It's 21.
Yeah.
The smoking age.
The smoking age. Okay. So smoking. Yeah. I mean, it's the same here it's smoking and drinking are the same here. They're both 19. So I guess it makes sense that they're both 21.
It just seems like if you can be drafted,
right?
Die for this country, but you can't have a beer or a cigarette, like go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're not an adult yet. You can't do that, but you put this fucking shit on and go to battle. Fuck
I can't believe we can drive at 16. That seems way too low when you think about it. I had several friends. This is funny. I didn't get my license until I was 17, but my parents didn't care. But I had several friends that didn't get their license until they're 17 because that was their parents' rule. They were like, okay, we know the law is 16, but we're calling it. We're making it 17.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just thought it was too young, and I don't necessarily disagree. So that's kind of crazy when you think about the responsibility of driving a car.
It's kind of like an individual basis, though. I mean, there were plenty of kids that were totally cool with it, but plenty that weren't. I started at 15, as I had a worker's permit or whatever, because I had a job. I got to drive at 15.
Yeah.
But
my camera go blurry.
They've definitely made it more of a process. Like you have to get your permit at 14 and do all this stuff before you can, to get it on time.
I'm still here. I just need to fix this. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, good. I need to. I think the cat went on the cord there. Let's see if I can fix this. No, that's not the right camera. Wrong camera. There we go.
Cool.
All good. But yeah. But anyway, this is the 70s, so it would have been 18 for most of that stuff back then.
Right. Yeah, they were all probably drinking at 18, right?
Yeah. And speaking of smoking, that is a small character quirk of Mike. And it's fun in that he always has a cigarette with him, and because he thinks it's cool, but he won't actually light it. And he uses the excuse that, like, well, if I play football again, I have to stay in shape. You can see he's in pretty good shape. He's shirtless a lot, and he's in very good shape.
Oh, yeah.
And there's also a part early in the movie when they're driving back, and there's this different world because you don't have this now, but there's a big billboard for cigarettes with the Marlboro brand on. And he sort of salutes it. It's like, he thinks the Marlboro brand's cool, even though he doesn't actually smoke. And there's a weird, awkward moment when Dave is pretending to be the Italian student, and he's out with Catherine. She actually takes out a cigarette, and he goes to light it, and for some reason his lighter goes like whoosh, like really high, and he can't do it. And then he just goes, you shouldn't smoke. It's kind of weird. But yeah, I do feel bad for Mike because, like I said, but when the movie's over, they've won the battle. He's won, and he's back. His passion for biking has been renewed. And of course, the joke at the end is when he's a student, he runs into a French exchange student that he can date because Catherine winds up leaving for Chicago. And, even though she's not into cycling, he's like, oh, well, the Tour de France, of course. Let's talk about that. And that's how the movie ends, which is a good
Is
thing.
that the end of it right there? Because that's the version I watched. That's where it cut off.
Well, then you see his father go by on a bike.
Okay, cool.
And then he addresses the father. His father has now been inspired by him, and he's biking. And he goes, and then he addresses his father in French. He says something like "Bonjour, Papa" or something like that. And then it like freeze frames on his father's like confused expression. It's like, now it's French or something like that. It's like, we get it. What a joke. But yeah.
I like at one point the father's talking about food. Like she's talking about a zucchini of all things. Like
yeah. Well, that's his rule, right? He says it's "ini" food. Anything Italian ends with "ini," and he counts zucchini. It's like that's just a vegetable, yo. But yeah, he has a lot of funny lines as we talk about.
Missing out on a lot of great food.
Yeah, he just has this weird like he's just developed this hatred for Italy because his son's been bombarding him with it. So now he's it's like, I want some American food. I want French fries. The part, of course, my favorite line of his is when she gets him a plate of fries, and he goes to look for the son. Dave comes in, starts eating the fries. It's like, hey, stop it! Them's my French fries. We get it. You're not educated. You didn't go to college. You're a cutter.
Them's my fries.
But I want to take a detour from the movie and talk about the Tour de France. Because I want to talk about Lance Armstrong in the Tour de France. Because as we said, and I mean, it's pretty much the same here, like the average American or Canadian does not really care about the Tour de France or cycling. Cycling is much bigger in Europe. But the thing that makes Americans care about sports and stuff that they didn't usually care about is if there's an American who's dominating. And that's what Lance Armstrong did. And that's what got a lot of people into it, right? And I totally agree with you, Orr, because yeah, and I want to say it too, like, fuck Lance Armstrong. And I don't need to justify it or anything like that, but I'll just say, it's not, because a lot of people who defend him and stuff point out, the thing like the doping, it's like rampant at Tour de France, right? Like everybody's doing it, is trying to get a playing field. I get all that. I believe it's true. I'm sure there's lots of, but one is he did still do it. Two, of all the ones that were doping or cheating, he was the most successful. So it's one. I mean, a lot of these guys are cheating and losing, but this guy managed to cheat so well that he won a whole bunch of times. But the other thing, again, I can live with all that. What bothers me was his attitude, because when these allegations started coming up, his just arrogance and his indignant, the way he reacted, like he was like, how dare you accuse me of this? Like he acted like he had so much credibility and so much integrity and shit. Like, how dare you? Like, people would interview him and his face, he had like veins popping on his face. Like he wanted to explode. He was so angry. They had the temerity to ask him about this. And of course he's just lying his ass off the whole time. That's why I hate Lance Armstrong, because and then of course he eventually does come clean. So it just proves. So that's why I hate him. I hate him because, yeah, it's one thing that he cheated and a lot of people cheated and stuff like that. But the other thing, it was the way he treated it when he got accused of it. Like, just, like that you could even consider that I cheated. It's so offensive to me. Like, I hated his fucking holier than thou attitude. And then, of course, all blows up. And of course, behind the scenes, it was even worse because the people that he knew did know, his reaction to that was, I will destroy you. I will burn your life to the fucking ground if you try to come at me. And I mean, so yeah. So that's why I fuck Lance Armstrong.
Well, I mean, the guy was a genetic freak. Like,
yeah, I mean, clearly he was a really good athlete.
Well, I mean, his heart's like 3 times the size of a normal person's heart, and not because of like, overweight or whatever causes that, and people are sick or whatever. But he could literally pump more blood than the average person, so he's built for doing what he was doing. So assuming no one else was doping and he wasn't doping, he should still win.
Yeah, it just shows the amount of.
I don't know, man. I mean, I think a lot of people are doing it, and I totally get what you're saying. But I mean, if everybody's using steroids and you can't really come down on this one guy.
Well, I mean, he was the winner, and he benefited the most from it. Just like people will point out, like the stuff he did for cancer and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, that's all good and stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, he said everybody cheated, but nobody benefited from cheating more than he did.
Right.
I mean, he made a brand and millions of dollars from it and all that Live Strong bullshit and stuff. And and as you said, you're right. Like I said, he was a talented athlete, but as you said, he had like this genetic advantage. Same thing with Michael Phelps, though.
Yeah.
I don't want to take anything away from Michael Phelps, who is this great dominant champion, but his wingspan is like longer than like most people are tall. He has like really abnormally large feet.
He's a freak.
Like, yeah. He looks like he's like an Atlantean.
He's made to swim. His hands, they say, this is an exact quote, are the size of dinner plates.
Yeah.
So he's like basically got, he's
paddle.
Made to swim.
He's paddle. Yeah. So that's not me trying to tear him down or anything like that. But I mean, it is true that some of these people, they just have like a built-in advantage, and that's fine. I'm not saying he shouldn't do it or he's a cheater. I'm just saying it is interesting to point that out. And you think about swimmers going up against him and looking at him and be like, Christ, how do I compete with that?
Like size 20 feet or something. He's got, what do you call those things? Flippers. He's got flippers on.
He's got flippers. But yeah. But that's for me why I hate Lance Armstrong, because I hated his goddamn attitude. Because we all know now that he was lying his ass off. But while he was lying, he looked like he was going to have just lose it. Like he was going to leap across the table and throttle people for asking him. Like, I fucking hate that.
I think he thought he could get away with it. And when it became apparent that he couldn't get away with it, then he came out, did a tell-all and apologized and blah, blah, blah. Went on Oprah. Yeah. But anyway, I don't really.
I'm not saying if you see the guy throw rocks at him in the street. I'm just saying, I'm just saying I have zero sympathy for him. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I've never found him likable even before we knew that stuff. But anyway. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is I think the only reason why most probably Americans liked him was because he was a winner. I don't think most Americans were into cycling,
It did. Man, you'd be surprised. It did really make a spike in the popularity of cycling here.
Oh, that's what I mean. But I mean, I think it's single-handedly because of him is what I mean. Because of his dominance, right? You had an American that was just dominating. I think without it, it would be a very small percentage of the population that would, tune into the Tour de France or even give a shit what was happening there,
I know the state of Texas, they actually have a dedicated lane for bike riders, basically because of Lance Armstrong.
No, we got bike lanes here.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, but like on all the roads, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Which is another reason why, like I said, I guess I could commit to cycling here more because there are more lanes than there used to be when I first moved here. But I don't know. But I do miss it. I mean, I would never have any interest in that sort of thing. But I did like going out, trails and stuff. I like mountain biking and stuff like that.
He's from Texas.
Early in the movie, after he first meets Catherine, he goes on his little happy ride. He goes on like a trail and like that's the first time he falls. It's like, well, you probably shouldn't take that kind of bike on a trail because there's a difference between your racing bike and a mountain bike. I wouldn't feel comfortable on those racing bikes with the really thin tires. Like, I like something rugged. I like something, that I can put through a lot of trauma, a lot of bashing around.
I never had a 10-speed. I was always kind of freaked out at how thin the tires were.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a mountain bike with lots of gears and stuff.
Yeah,
and I actually got into mountain biking pretty hard. When I was in junior high school.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I mostly just got to drive around town, but every once in a while I got to go to some more. Mm-hmm. There were even places not too far from where I live. We live near woods and stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I mean, I put my bike through hell. Surprised it held up as well as it did because I was not the type of person that knew much about bike maintenance. Like I wasn't like some expert that was always tinkering with it. My bike was what it was. Every once in a while I pumped up the tires. That was about it.
Yeah, same.
It's still in my garage. I mean, it's way too small for me now, but it's still in my parents' garage in pretty decent shape considering that I used the hell out of it for like a decade.
Yeah.
But I live near several bike shops. So that's another thing. I often get to see like the big window display of really awesome looking bikes. So I look at those all the time too when I go out and walk places. I'm always looking at them.
So you just watch the movie?
I've seen the movie. Or do you want me to start lifting, bro? I'm more of a cardio guy.
Maybe both?
I mean, I'm not against weight stuff. I don't know. I have to figure something out because of Well, first because of my health, then because of money, and then because of the pandemic, I have not, been able to do any martial arts training in like going on 2 years now, and I need to do something. And I've thought about, the gym around here doing something. I just need direction. I'm really bad. Like I don't mind putting in the work. I'm just bad at knowing what to do. And I know that there's probably people that can help you. I don't know. I'm awfully scrawny to start lifting at this point in my life.
You should start juicing.
Yeah, I would maybe. I don't know where you can get it though.
Yeah, me either.
People always act like you go to any gym and there'll be somebody there that can give you steroids, but I don't think so.
Yeah, when you get a certain age, your testosterone levels drops. You can probably get it legally.
That's true. What's the one that sounds good? It's one fighters pop for a lot.
There's so many.
I know, but it's some sort of hormone one.
HGH.
Yeah, it's probably HGH. I always want to say like, I always want to say MGH, which isn't real. It's from the Marvel universe. It's mutant growth hormone. It's this street drug that will temporarily give you mutant powers.
Awesome.
So I always think of that, but it's like that is not real. Yeah. It's probably the HGH I'm thinking of. That sounds pretty good. Because I don't hear about that one having the like ball shrinking stuff, but maybe it does.
I think if you overdo it, I think it has that effect on everybody. Oh.
I think always the attitude with steroids, like maybe is probably like, I'll just use a little to get me going, and then I'll just do the real work, and then I won't need it anymore. But then it always turns into no, need more.
Yeah, that's the thing with steroids is when you go off of them, you lose the benefits.
Yeah,
which is why it causes so many psychological effects on people.
See, that's what we need. We need scientists to be working on better steroids.
Yeah, instead of making viruses in labs. I was trying to see what TJ Dillashaw got hit for. His was something weird. Like I couldn't even make sense out of it.
Yeah, he got 2 like full years for it too.
Yeah, he's coming up sometime soon. He's got a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of that, you know what I don't like is fucking John Jones immediately getting a title shot.
Well, is he?
I mean, last I heard he was, but he may have backed out of it, like you were saying.
Because I mean, the timeline I remember is declares his intention to fight at heavyweight, and then pumps up and gains weight to do that, and sits on the sidelines for a while, and then waits for the winner there, and talks about fighting right away for the title. But then he actually backs off and says he doesn't mind if Derek Lewis fights for the title first. Yeah. I don't know if that means if he waits or if in the meantime he has a non-title fight of his own. And then just the other day had some sort of weird breakdown and talked about like how they didn't respect him or pay him enough and asked the UFC to just cut him already.
Okay, how many times has he done that though? I mean, he's done that multiple times before.
I mean, doesn't he? I thought he's one of the best paid fighters there is, isn't he? Like, a very small fraction of the UFC roster makes more money than him. Like Conor McGregor, obviously, at the top. But who else makes more money than John Jones?
I'm not aware.
You're not going to tell me that, like, Kamaru Usman makes more money than John Jones. You're not going to tell me that, like, Davison Figueiredo or whatever, he's the flyweight guy, makes more than John Jones. John Jones has to be, like, in the top 3 highest paid fighters. And now he's bitching and saying, like, they don't appreciate him. They treat him so badly because because he wants some ridiculous amount to fight for the heavyweight title. I don't know. I mean, I've been tired of him for 7 years.
Me too.
I'd be happy if they did cut him and he went away. Except it doesn't matter because you know what? Even if they cut him, he would just go fight somewhere else and he'd whine his head off there. Like he's the whiniest fighter I am aware of, which is amazing considering his huge track record of success. Right. Just nonstop whining, never takes responsibility for his own actions, including, various steroids, including getting coked up and hitting run people and fleeing the scene and nightclub shenanigans and all that. What an asshole. I would love them to just cut him, but even if they did that, he still wouldn't stop whining.
No, he's a cash cow for Dana, so he's not going to cut him.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. But I hope the guy gets his comeuppance, honestly. Like, I hope Ngannou knocks him the fuck out.
I think he would. I don't think there's anybody in the world Ngannou can't knock out, man.
Fuck that guy. That guy's a beast, man.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, go back and watch those knockouts. Like the thing, and I mean, he really proved it too with this fight with Stipe, because it would have been one thing if he knocked him out the way he knocked out Rosenstrike. Because one of his last fights, he fought Rosenstrike, or Rosenstrike, however you say. It's basically like 30 seconds in, he does like this weird flurry that Rosenstrike can't keep up with and KOs him, right? If he did that to Miocic, a lot of people would still say, well, that doesn't necessarily prove he's like that great of a fighter. It's more like he caught him. But in this, like he fought into the second round. He dealt with everything Miocic threw at him in the first round very calmly. He didn't rush. He waited, and when he had the opportunity, he took it. So I think that's really definitive to me that he won it in that way. Because actually, if it was like a super fast like knockout, a lot of people will say, well, that's what he can do, and he was just too fast for Miocic, and he caught him off guard. But the fact that they stood toe to toe and had a real fight before it happened, I think proves like how much he's improved since the last time they fought. Whereas Miocic, basically managed to stay out of his way the whole time and pick him apart. Because a lot of people will be like, well, Jones can pick him apart. I don't know now. Jones definitely wouldn't be a small heavyweight, though. I've seen the photos. He did bulk up a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, his things like his reach advantage are not, they're not as, significant as they're going to be in the light heavyweight. He was a big light heavy, though.
Yeah, once again, talking about like talent versus just physical advantages. He was a light heavyweight, which is the second biggest, but still, he has the longest reach on the entire roster. Stefan Struve, who is gone now, who is 6'11", didn't have the reach John Jones had, and to this day, he has the longest reach. So, but you're right, it'll be less against another heavyweight probably, but I mean, think how good Cormier was to fight him. Cormier was 5'11".
Right, that reach advantage was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because he was just a fat heavyweight, or I guess less fat light heavyweight.
Yeah, and yet, I mean, it makes sense for him to be a light heavyweight, and yet Cormier was ridiculously successful as a heavyweight. So yeah, and I get it. Cormier is kind of annoying too, but not nearly the level of John Jones. I mean, I'll see people like criticize Cormier. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it, but I mean, Jones is like up here as far as being like a crazy asshole. I mean, I get that Cormier might be smug or say the odd thing now. Again, nobody's perfect. But I mean, Jones, and I only first got into this right before everything sort of burst for Jones. Jones was like still in his mid-20s. He was the youngest champ ever. And he, nothing bad had happened yet. And he had this image of being like super, almost like pure. He would talk about like God and religion and faith and family and hard work and dedication and all this shit. And then like eventually that all came crashing down. We saw it was, it's the complete opposite. And he doesn't hide from it anymore. He just admits, yeah, I'm a total asshole. And why don't you like me? I mean, that's kind of what he says nowadays. Like, I don't get it. It's like, I'm unrepentant about every mistake I ever made and every dumb, horrible, stupid thing I've done or said. Why don't you guys like and respect me? Anyway. So, right up there with Lance Armstrong. Fuck you, Jones.
My dad always told me, it was one lesson that he taught me that was a really good one. If someone's running around talking about like, Christianity and religion and stuff all the time, like be wary of that person. Because people that actually are religious aren't talking about it all the time like that.
No, you just sort of live it,
Right.
Just blab it. The people they're blabbing it are just using it as a cover or something. Is pretty much what it is.
But this is what I was trying to think of. EPO is what TJ got popped for. Yeah, and I can't even figure out what it is. It's a glycoprotein cytokine. It stimulates red blood cell production in the bone marrow.
I guess that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
The science is getting over my head.
I know.
I think how like crazy it would be. Like, imagine if like some fighter wound up taking something, thinking it was that, and it was like the complete opposite. Like, imagine like right like in leading up to a big fight, a fighter like took a bunch of like blood thinner or something. They get punched in the face and like bleed to death in the ring.
That would be funny.
It would be terrifying, but it would also be kind of funny. Yeah.
or estrogen or something.
Yeah, they're just like they can't breathe or move or anything.
Crying all the time. Get hit and they start crying.
Speaking of which, I never heard this before, but we'll get off the fighting stuff in a minute, I promise people. But so I'd never heard this because I'm not a boxing person. So recently, upcoming middleweight guy, Kevin something.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, he lost, right? He was big hype upcoming guy, but he lost. He got outfought by a veteran. And he blabbed the whole through the fight. Even though he was losing, he never shut up. He kept talking. And like because White has to like give his opinion on every single thing that happens. And I get it, they do stick a mic in his face, so they do ask. They asked him what he thought and stuff like that. He said he thought that Kevin Holland, that's it. He thought that Holland suffered some sort of mental breakdown in the ring, which I think is going a bit far. And he said, I hadn't seen anything like that since blah, blah, blah. And he mentioned there was a guy that fought, I can't remember if it was Lennox Lewis. I always get Lennox Lewis and another popular heavyweight of the era. I always get the two mixed up. I think it was Lewis.
Vander Holyfield?
Yeah, those two. I know who they are, but I get their careers mixed up. I can't remember who did what, who fought what. I think it was Lewis. I'm pretty sure it was Lewis. Anyway, at some point, Lewis fought this guy who was a pretty good guy who had been champ for a while or something like that. And they had a rematch. And the guy literally did have a mental breakdown during it. Like he puts his hands down. He stops fighting. At certain points, he's crying. Like you can watch it on YouTube. It's crazy.
Oh, I want to see it.
So that's a real thing. But anyway, I'd never heard of that until White mentioned it. But anyway, what Kevin Holland did was nothing comparable at all. He just kept talking. Like he probably knew he was losing, but you know, it's his thing to talk, so he kept losing. But yeah, this guy really did have like some crazy breakdown. And then like in the press conference, he was saying like it was all part of his strategy. Like he knew that like and one thing was true. Like Lewis, while reluctant to hit somebody that wouldn't fight back, did hit him. And he was saying, you know, like he hit me with his best stuff and it did nothing. I'm like, I'm not sure it was his best stuff. I think he was so confused that like I don't think he was really, you know, because this guy was not defending himself or doing any offense at all. And later he would just sort of walk around and he did basically start crying. At one point his corner called him, you know, the round ended and they called him to the corner and he refused to come and he just sort of walked back and forth and you can see tears in his eyes. It's really fucked up. But yeah, I'd never heard of that until White mentioned it and I looked it up. But no, the Kevin Holland thing is not remotely comparable. I do not think Kevin Holland had a breakdown. I think he just was losing a fight and it's his thing to talk. So even though he was losing, he still talked because that's what he does.
You want me to bring that up right now?
Sure, why not?
Awesome.
Can do a little Sagan from it's sports. It's related to Breaking Away.
Yeah,
we're on topic doing some sports stuff here.
That's what we do. Let's see if it'll cooperate with me here.
Can't remember his name, but this will show his name.
Oh, it's
Oliver McCall. Yeah, and he was a legitimately good boxer. Like he held a title. So McCall's the one in the black shorts. Like eventually, he's not even gonna have his hands up.
Oh, that's not very smart in boxing.
Oh, I know. I mean, it shows that he does have some toughness here because he's not defending himself through like 90% of this. Like, look, he just walks away. This is still early. He's actually putting his hands up. Like later, his hands are just completely down. So it is Lennox Lewis, right?
Yeah, it is Lennox Lewis. Yeah, it's not too long of a video, so we can just watch the.
Yeah, it's just the highlights.
Watch the downfall here.
Lennox Lewis wasn't born in Canada, but he won a gold medal in boxing for Canada, I think in 1988, because he became like a Canadian citizen or something.
Was he? Where is he? He's from like the islands or something, huh? Like Caribbean or something?
Yeah, I think so.
He's not even going to his corner.
No, like I said, they're calling him. They're asking him to come.
Man, what's going through his head?
I mean, at one point, the ref, you know, feels he has to intervene and ask.
Oh, there he is.
Look at him. There he's crying. Yeah, right? And the ref is like, "Do you want to continue?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do." It's like, what? Well, clearly, you want to be anywhere but here, dude. Like, you are not fighting.
Oh man, That's rough.
This should be the end. It's not the end. You should wave it off right here, right?
You want to keep going?
So see, this is the ref saying, like, do you want to fight? So now he finally sits, and he's saying, yeah, I want to fight. It's like, it doesn't seem like it because you're not fighting. Like, the ref does wave it off soon. Like, he just sees enough. Like, he doesn't, like, get brutally KO'd or anything.
I mean, in his defense, Lennox Lewis was a beast. I actually did watch a good bit of boxing around that time.
And he takes a lot of hard shots. He's very tough.
Sure.
But, and like, yeah, I saw like highlights of the press conference. Yeah, so the ref just waves it off. He's just like, fuck it, you're not fighting, type thing. But like, he's like, in the press conference, he's saying it was all strategy. It was like a rope-a-dope thing. Like Lennox Lewis, I took all his best shots, and later on, I was, he's gonna get tired. I was gonna take him out, but nobody bought it. And after that, he literally was checked into like a mental institution for a while. So. Yeah.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Like this was not just like an isolated incident. It's just like the culmination of it. No, he had a lot of problems after that. I think he still did fight a little after that somehow, but yeah. But anyway, I'd never heard of that, but White mentioned it in that interview about Holland. It was kind of interesting. So yeah,
his $3 million purse was held up pending the outcome of the examination.
He probably has like no money nowadays.
McCall gave a rambling 40-minute explanation of his actions in the ring, which led to his disqualification for refusing to fight, even though the World Boxing Council title was on the line. My strategy was, and I know it sounds kind of absurd, was kind of a rope-a-dope. Said rope-a-dope was a strategy that Muhammad Ali adopted in his victory over George Foreman in Zaire in 1974, when Ali leaned on the ropes and allowed Foreman to punch himself out. Oh, okay. So basically tire yourself out.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. He's like saying, I was going to come after him after he was tired out in the later rounds. But I mean, again, you saw him like bursting into tears and stuff. And I mean, if you're going to do a rope-a-dope, your best bet is to like try to make them miss.
Bob and weave a lot, right?
Yeah. It's not like put your hands down and walk back and forth, So yeah, so that is an actual emotion, like mental breakdown or emotional breakdown in the ring. That is legit. Definitely the most famous one.
Wow. And real quick, and we'll stop talking about fighting. Sean O'Malley won. It was a decision, right?
No, he KO'd him.
Oh, he did KO him. Okay.
I didn't see any of that card, but every fight went the way I expected. Like Almeida was basically a gimme fight for him to get him back on the thing, which is weird because it's funny how things work in MMA, because like 4 years ago, Almeida was the same thing as O'Malley. He was like a young guy that was wrecking everybody. But now recently he's on like a bad, he's been on a bad, not a bad tear. A tear is a good thing. He's been on a bad run. He's been on a bad run.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, as you said, like I was a little wrong in saying like how under the radar breaking way it was. I mean, it did win the Academy Award for Best Screenplay, so that's something, and got nominated in quite a few other categories.
And it's yet another one of the films on the 1,000 films to watch before you die.
Yeah, we're gonna get through all of them, I think, as we go forward here.
There are quite a few.
Yeah. And breaking away, of course, is a term from cycling, which just basically means, I guess, breaking away from the pack, I think, during a race. But it also works on two levels because it's sort of breaking away and figuring out what to do with your life. Right. Although, again, the movie doesn't end on any sort of really definitive note, as we said. So it's like Cyril, we're not worried about Cyril. He seems happy, whatever he does. And, of course, we didn't talk about Mooch. The only thing Mooch cared about was his girlfriend. And I guess he got married, right? Like, they went into the courthouse and just sort of got married, and that's all he really wanted out of life was to marry his girlfriend. So he did that, so he's happy. But, yeah, I feel like Mike, like you said, he's just going to wind up like the town drunk. Just, like, every night, like, driving out onto, like, the football field and ranting about, like, his past glory. And how he can't, and how he hates all these college students and stuff.
I mean, like, what does he think? Like, the NFL is not just going to come find you.
Yeah. Well, again, he's having that like sort of weird like denial thing, right? Because he's saying, I don't even want to play college ball, but it's obvious like he would
That's all he
like to.
talks about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like as uplifting as the movie is, like I am a little worried about what happened to Mike after this movie ended. Like he had his great moment with his friend, and he was genuinely happy for his friend, and he genuinely tried. He got on the bike and he gave it his all. Because I mean, that's the other thing that I think is good. Because in some movies, and I mean some of them, it's fine because they are based on true stories. So, but you know, a lot of these sports movies, it's kind of weird and unsatisfying how suddenly somebody who was really bad at a sport like gets really good at it in a short amount of time to win. Yeah. Like this isn't about that. Like Dave was always really good. He's like self-taught, super dedicated, and really good. He's a marvel. I mean, right. he did so many laps by himself. He caught up to the Italians. He was great. But his friends, you know, they are what they were. You know, Mike was at least athletic. The other two, not so much. None of them really were into cycling, but they went and gutted it out, and they did just enough so that their friend could win. And that's what I appreciate, and that's what, you know, a lot of sports is about. And I think that's what separates like people that actually enjoy doing athletic things and people that don't. And, you know, I'm not super athletic, but, you know, I considered myself that growing up. It was part of my identity. And whether I was a kid or as an adult, and again, I'm not super dedicated or anything, and, you know, I'm never going to shred it or anything like that, or become an amazing, you know, Muay Thai or Taekwondo or anything like that. But there is a difference, because I know plenty of people that are, and I'm not criticizing them either. I'm just saying this is how they are. That if they're going to do something hard, like a bunch of push-ups or something, you know, something that pushes them or strains them, when it's over, they're like, shit, I don't want to do that again. Mm-hmm. You know, whereas with somebody that's into that, you know, you feel it all the same, but you get a certain rush of satisfaction of knowing that you pushed yourself, you know, and that comes into this, and it comes into a lot of the better sports movies. I think it's not necessarily always about like, oh, suddenly I magically have the talent to overcome this or something. It's just about taking what you have and pushing yourself as hard as you can. That doesn't always, you know, it's only the best can be the best, but right. you can do better than what you thought.
Well, it's like heart, right? Heart can make up for a lot of, you know, other inadequacies somewhere else.
Right. Like you can't do it alone, but I mean, it can carry you through something like what they do in that Rudy movie, right? Like he has that like one play. He gets into the game for the one play and he gives his all and it works out. We know realistically, you know, he's not going to be a successful college football player, but in his one opportunity, like he nailed it, you know, and that's sort of what it's about, overcoming that. There's actually, speaking of marathons, there's an amusing episode of King of the Hill from back of the day, where Bobby, of course, you know, the whole dichotomy there is that Bobby is not at all athletic. And that's what Hank was. He was a football player and an athlete. He was always sort of disappointed that Bobby was not athletic in the slightest. And Bobby winds up inadvertently joining the track and field team. And the only reason he does is because the coach realizes that he can use him to motivate his players by shaming them. Every time the players like shirk or you know, or don't follow direction, he pulls them out and puts Bobby in their place, and then Bobby fails spectacularly, and he says, "You see that? That's you, right?" So of
that's
course,
awesome.
Yeah, right.
Bobby's like a motivational tool.
To the point where the coach is like, I'm going to be in the track Hall of Fame. Everybody's going to follow this model because it really does work. It motivates his players. They don't want to be embarrassed, right? Bobby, of course, is oblivious to this. Eventually, when he finds out, he doesn't even care because he still cares that he's contributing. But once Hank finds out, he's really upset, of course. And then it all comes together where they're going to do this thing where they have to finish the relay. But one of the guys actually gets injured, and he's just like, oh shit, I had to put Bobby in for real for this. This isn't a motivational thing. I really need it. And the whole thing is, you know, that their team is the best. They go out to a big lead, but then when it gets to Bobby, he sucks, and everybody catches up to him, right? And he's just like, because, you know, he's fat and out of shape and everything. But then a miracle happens as they come through where the racers get all tangled up and they all fall on each other. So Bobby now has a chance to make it to the finish line. And he does, and he guts it out, and he just barely makes it. He makes it by like this much with them recovering it. But I mean, and that is like the good lesson. Like it's true. And like Hank even puts it in perspective. He says, well, you blew a huge lead, and it took everybody else falling on their faces right before they got to the finish line, but you did it. And that really is sort of like the point of athletics and stuff like that. Not everybody can be the best and stuff, but you just do, you give what you have. You give all you have, you do your best. And sometimes it can work out. But yeah, that's an amusing episode of the thing. They give them the nickname, the Stick. But
I need to go back and watch that whole show again. I didn't watch it religiously or anything.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of really clever episodes. I've talked about some of my issues with the show too, but I mean, at the end of the day, I was a fan. I like the show. But yeah, there's some very clever episodes, and that's one of them that's pretty funny. Bobby as the Stick.
I always thought it was weird how like Hank Hill is essentially the old man neighbor from Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, they were whacking off in my tool shed.
But that old man just was bald and Hank has hair. That's like the only difference.
Yeah, they're just like, make him a little younger, give him a family. Boom. He's even in the Beavis and Butthead movie.
Yeah.
Beavis and Butthead Do America. Which I haven't seen in so long. I should watch it. I wonder if it holds up. It probably does not. I have a very strong suspicion it does not hold up. But I would probably still like it because, I'm a fan. I like that stuff.
I like Mike Judge.
Yeah, I like Mike Judge.
I like pretty much everything he's done, honestly.
Yeah.
Even like Extract and stuff like that people,
like
nobody
Extract.
ever talks about.
I like it. Of course, Mila Kunis helps.
Yeah, that is true.
Love her. Yeah, always been a fan of Mike Judge, pretty much since the beginning.
Idiocracy is like the best thing ever.
I like Idiocracy a lot. I still feel like, given that premise, it could have been even better, but it's good.
It's just so it holds up so well for me because it's like we're already there. Like it didn't take however many thousands of years. We're there.
No, not at all, man. I might as well talk about this since it's sort of related because about how dumb people are. It's like I have to stop like overestimating people. Like people are always even dumber than you think they are. Mm-hmm. And what amuses me about like some of the dumb people nowadays, it's not even what you think it's going to be. This is going to be like a fandom type thing, right? So because it's about how easily, and it's hard to explain because of course I always talk about the stuff I really like that I'm into. The whole point of it is like I'm really into it and I can get even it affects me on an emotional level and stuff like that, right? But there's still a difference between getting into on an emotional level about various things like a TV show or a movie or a video game and stuff like that, and not really being able to separate that from reality, mm-hmm. which I thought was more of a rare thing. Like it's only like a few people that can do this, but now I've come to realize that like, and I mean, I know most of these people aren't like completely delusional, but like, it's weird just how like easily manipulated they are by stuff in fiction. And I'll come back again to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So on my feed again, discussing film or somebody put up a thing saying this is a new promotional poster from the show, and it's a poster of the Cap replacement, John Walker, right? Because that I don't know if you know what's going on in that show, but a big part of it is like the American government has come up since Steve Rogers is gone or retired over there. Even though they didn't discuss it with anybody, they're just going to pick a soldier and make a new Captain America. It is somewhat based on the comics. This did really happen with a guy named John Walker, who eventually became the character U.S. Agent, who was on the West Coast Avengers since he was like God. So it's somewhat based on that. So the whole thing is like, while Bucky and Sam are doing their missions, this is also in the background. Right now, there's this new Cap that has nothing to do with them, and they weren't asked and stuff. So obviously, they're upset about it. Obviously, right? That's the most obvious thing in the world. Within the context of the fictional world, the fictional government has decided, hey, we're going to make a new Cap and act like he's just as great as the old one and blah, blah, blah. And this will create conflict within the show. Any fucking idiot can figure this out, right? And yet, when discussing film, retweets this new promotional poster with, John Walker in the Cap getup there, all these people are tweeting responding to it, not as if they're an audience who are watching the show, but as if they're people who live in that world and are expressing their disapproval for this replacement Cap. It's so weird. They're acting like they think the creators of the show are the ones that came up with the idea to replace Cap. Like, they're like, not my Captain America. And all these shots of like the real Steve Rogers and stuff like that. I'm like, and I actually said something. It got a lot of likes. I'm so proud of myself. It was like 59 likes, where I said like something like, I love how people were reacting to this as if it's not like a story that's being told. And most people got it, but some people didn't. I didn't bother bothering with them because they're idiots. But I just mean, I'm just amazed how easily manipulated the audience is. And actually, what I didn't even get in trouble for that. It was something later I said, where somebody had said something, and I said, like, I have to, like, I would never, paraphrasing, but it's like, I would never make fun of anybody for having passion about a show or something, because I've got that too. But I have to wonder about like how people separate things, because it's like, like, are these the same people that like every time they watch Game of Thrones, when like Joffrey came on the screen, did they like boo and hiss at him? You know,
I was close. I was close to that with Joffrey in particular.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you understood what his point was.
Well,
it's not like he
absolutely.
was there to be liked. He was there to be awful and to drive this sort of action. And yet I feel like there were certain people that couldn't separate that and seemed to think that, no, the creators of the show like had made this character and were presenting him in a way that we were supposed to like him, and they were really mad about how mean he was. Like, it's so weird. And sort of the same thing here with this John Walker thing. It's the story. In the fictional world, the fictional government has come up with this idea to replace Cap. But all these people were acting like the people who have created the show have decided to replace Cap. And they're all trying to sell John Walker as better than Cap or as good. Like, I don't know. I have to stop like thinking people can't be as stupid as they are, because they can always be dumber and dumber and dumber. So yeah, this isn't even necessarily a toxic fandom thing, Jacob, although that is absolutely a thing. Yeah, and if you're on Twitter long enough, you see it all over the place. Yeah. I mean, I guess this could be because it could evolve into that if people are going to start arguing and fighting over it. But I'm just amazed that these people are viewing the show through a lens as if not they're the audience, but they're actually living in that world, which I've never done. So that does kind of blow me away. They're all like, not my Cap. They're like, boo, thumbs down. I'm like, Jesus. I mean, and I know people have always been this way. You go back to like Shakespeare making fun of that. Like you do the Julius Caesar thing, right? Where the people are just sheep. They just agree with whoever just spoke last. You know? Marcus comes out and is just like, hey, everybody, listen to me. I've got this to say. And they're all like, oh, yeah, you're right. And then the other guy comes out. I can't remember everyone else. Like, everything he said is wrong. And they're like, you're right. Boo. They show it all the time in The Simpsons, too, right? The crowd, they constantly do that on The Simpsons with crowd scenes where they just listen to whoever spoke last. They're doing that part in remember the classic Whacking Day episode with the snakes and Barry White? And so this is at the end where Barry White and Lisa give the long speech about how it's wrong to beat up the snakes. So they all change their mind. They're like, yeah, we shouldn't hurt the snakes. Then Mayor Quimby shows up with his pre-waxed snakes and says, look, everybody, 12 dead snakes. And they boo him. And he goes, I've had it with you people. You're nothing but a pack of fickle mushheads. And they go, he's right. Give us hell, Quimby. And they're exactly right, because that's exactly what they are. And I don't want to compare The Simpsons to real life, but it's totally fucking true. There's a whole crowd of people like that. Whoever just talked last or whatever, that's who they'll agree with.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
So, I mean, I was amused and horrified kind of at the same time the other day to see all these people reacting to John Walker. Like he was like a real person who was replacing the real Cap, and like how like the creators of the show were trying to like fool us or bamboozle us. Oh, man. Like sometimes I don't understand why people watch stuff with conflict if they're like so confused or upset by the conflict. Did they want a show where like Steve Rogers comes back and goes like this and they all smile and nobody does anything? Is that the adventure comic book show you want to watch? So yeah, so there's no point trying to engage those people on any sort of intellectual level. But I mean, I'm just still kind of baffled by that. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, John Walker's not a real person.
The characters change all the time in comic books.
This is a story. Yeah. I mean, but again, this wasn't like that. This wasn't like, you know, the comic book characters just killing off a character like really, you know, meanly and then saying, hey, this guy's better. Like within the comic and the show, the whole point was like, that's not what they're doing. That's what happened in the world. Because they were like, because in the case of, you know, Steve Rogers, they actually replaced him a bunch of times. But again, that wasn't the creators. Because it's been retconned. Because, okay, after Cap went in the ice and Bucky supposedly died at the end of World War II, that's not really what happened in the Golden Age comics. The war just ended. You know, they didn't actually have that comic happen. And then in the 50s, they had them continue their adventures, like mostly fighting about communists. Then they both kind of disappeared for a while again. Then in 1963, when the Avengers started, it was retconned in that famous thing that Cap and Bucky had been lost in World War II, and the whole idea was, hey, but here's Cap. He's been in the ice for 15 years, and now we're going to bring him out. And then they had to do further retcons. They're like, okay, so the 50s Cap, that was obviously the American government saying, oh, it would be bad for morale to say he died. So here they are, they're alive, and they had replacement ones. In the case of John Walker, which is in like the more present day continuity, there was this whole story about Cap tracing all sorts of corruption and stuff. And in real life, this was in the 70s, like right after Watergate. So what happened was he traces all this corruption and evil stuff, and he finds out right at the top, it's actually the president. It's not somebody controlling the president or hiding or pretending to be the president or anything like that. It's the real president, obviously Nixon, but they don't say that. And right after that, Cap becomes so disillusioned, he stops being Captain America and he becomes a character called Nomad, the idea being he's a man with no country. So it's during that brief period that the US government, in the comics, not the comics themselves, again, this was a narrative choice, they came up with John Walker. They're like, okay, he'll be like the new Cap, and went from there. And they're obviously doing something fairly similar for this in the show. It's not the creators of the show saying, here's John Walker, he's way better than Steve Rogers, or this actor is way better than Chris Evans. It's just amazing how easily emotionally manipulated these people are. I mean, they're feeling the right things, but they don't seem to understand that it's not real. Anyway, I know I went on way too long about that, but I was just sort of baffled. I was like, I couldn't believe that was the response. Anyway, it's a pretty good show so far. It's too bad it's only going to be 6 episodes. I really enjoyed WandaVision. I think it was really great, but this was the show I was waiting for. This was the really one I was really interested in because I like those characters, and especially Winter Soldier. My favorite of the movies is the second Captain America with Winter Soldier, and my favorite of the movies are all the Cap-centered ones. So this is, obviously, Steve Rogers isn't in it, but it's all about his stuff and those people. And yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. We'll see. I don't know why the freckly girl has to be there again, though. I'm going to sound a real dick. So I don't know how well you remember Solo, a Star Wars story. But there's this whole thing where there's like this bad gang, and it turns out actually they're not a bad gang, but at first you think they are, and their leader has this big mask on, and then when they take the mask off, it's actually like this young freckly girl. The same thing just happened in this one. It's the same actress, and she's part of like this gang of like superpowered terrorists. You take off the mask, and it's like, oh wow, it's like this cute freckly girl. I don't know, Disney, stop using her. At least not for these same roles. I don't know. Anyway, that's just a weird coincidence quibble. We'll get off it. Or circle around. This can be a shorter one. We can pretty much wrap up on Breaking Away. But yeah, I just felt like it was sort of a good idea, a good excuse to finally watch the movie all the way through and do something a little different. Sports movies in general don't lend themselves well to being on the show given the way they work, but this is a little different. It has a little more personal stuff going on. There's all sports movies have other stuff going on besides them, but I like the coming of age stuff. I like the whole dichotomy, talking about the conflict between the college life and the townies and how people look down on each other and things like that. The labels we put on each other in society, et cetera, et cetera. I think it all works really well. I think it's wrapped up together with some really interesting, likable characters that have a bit more depth than you might think at first. Because at first, it's just sort of like, Mike's kind of a bitter jerk, and maybe that is all he is. But at least he's still a good friend. The parents are just goofy entertainment, but no, you see a bit more about them, and you see their relationship with their son kind of waver and change by the end of the movie. I don't know. Usually, we've done coming of age movies before, like we did Stand By Me, but I like the idea of doing a coming of age movie where the situation isn't quite as grave or serious, because that's kind of even more like real life too. Like, how many of us have had a Stand By Me experience? Well, not me, but something like Breaking Away, yeah, a little closer. Maybe not exactly, but at least on the emotional level, I can relate a little closer. So I like that. I really like. It's neat that it brings some attention to that place in Indiana where that race happens. Seems like a really cool place. It seems like it would have been a nice place to grow up in, really. I like that. Yeah, and I mean, as goofy and annoying as Dave can be, I think he is an endearing character. Now, maybe not everybody can relate to him. I can relate to him a little bit. I certainly can relate to him with like getting really obsessed with somebody else's culture. Everybody knows I'm sort of an otaku geek, all into Japanese stuff. Not to the point that I went around, calling my parents various Japanese names and things like that. But I don't know. It could get to that as I've slowly am learning the language. But yeah, I also thought this movie was just sort of like a good sort of like way to clear. I don't know. Sometimes, there's ways to tie movies together that we've done, which obviously we do on purpose a lot of the time. I like that this doesn't really have any connection to other movies we've done recently. It's just its own thing. And then from here, we can jump onto something else. There is one little connection, though, is that so the last show we did was The Driver. One of them, and obviously we talked mostly in The Driver about how it was connected to the movie The Samurai, but also The Driver has its links, being a driving movie, to the Steve McQueen movie Bullet. They even wanted Steve McQueen in the role. The director of Bullet is the director of this movie, and his name is Peter Yates. So that's kind of interesting. I don't have your sound. I don't know if other people can hear you or not.
Sorry, I was muted.
Here it is. Yeah.
Yeah, very different movie is what I said.
Yeah, Peter Yates, an English director. I think this and Bullet are the only things by him I've seen. Although he did Krull. I saw Krull, although I don't really remember it.
He did another movie with Dennis Quaid later in the 80s.
Okay.
What was it called? Suspect.
Suspect, 1987. Mystery thriller. Cher is in that movie. Wow, Liam Neeson in 1987? I want to see a Liam Neeson from 1987. I don't think I've seen anything with him that's that old. Ooh, Joe Mantegna, too. Starring Joe Mantegna as Fat Tony.
Passed away in 2011, it looks like.
Oh, yeah. He was already pretty old.
Yeah.
Peter Yates.
See, I think I'm the same with you. I don't think I've seen a lot of these films.
Yeah. But, I knew he passed away because one of the articles I read about this movie was, like, written in 2011. It was, like, to mark his death. They were like, let's revisit this movie. Yeah, Peter Yates. Yeah, he was 81, so pretty long run.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting that he actually did a Bullet. So that is a kind of weak tie-in to The Driver that we did last week. So it is something. It's a little bit of just a coincidence, I suppose. But yeah, I like the idea of doing a movie that was just in every way different from some of the stuff we've done before. And as I said, it's as far as like sports movies in general go, they're not really ideal topics for this show. But I thought this movie had enough sort of uniqueness and a little bit about its own history and reputation that lent into it. I like the people in it. I get a kick out of seeing Daniel Stern and Dennis Quaid that young. Mm-hmm. Daniel Stern, that age, he reminds me of someone. I don't know if it's somebody I'm thinking of who's also an actor or somebody I knew in real life. But Daniel Stern as Cyril in this movie, the way he looked and sounded then, reminds me of someone. But I don't know if it's a famous person or just somebody I actually knew. But yeah, I almost wish there were a few more scenes with him because he's funny. He's, of course, is a pretty gifted. Wow, how old is that? I was thinking about Justine Bateman the other day. She was super attractive. And I was thinking about her because I was thinking about Arrested Development, which she did an episode of because, of course, her brother is the main guy on that. Because I was thinking about Jessica Walter, who just passed away, who was, again, she was older too, but again, I'm sad. She might have been 81 as well, but yeah, Jessica Walter is awesome. And a lot of stuff, but for me, the definitive roles are Arrested Development and Archer. So funny.
Right.
She might be the funniest character in Archer.
Yeah, man, that sucks. Was she ill? I didn't even realize.
I don't know.
But
I didn't read too much about it.
We're at an age now where the boomers are dropping like flies, man.
Yeah, she would be among them, I suppose. You're right.
I mean, just of that age group, They're getting
Yeah.
up in the age to where.
Yeah, my father's birthday is in a couple days. He'll be 71.
Wow. Same age as my mother.
Yeah.
She'll be 71 in May.
My mother's birthday is also in May. Yeah, my family, our birthdays are all squashed together. 3 Aprils and a May. I was supposed to be May. I came late. I threw off the balance. But yeah, my sister's 3 years older than me, but our birthdays are only 4 days apart.
Oh.
Word.
Have we done anything by David Mamet?
No, we've talked about it. I've tried to get. Did he do House of Games?
You've mentioned House of Games a lot. Yeah, he did House of Games.
That's one I want to do and can't fucking find anywhere.
I can't find it either. That's a problem we have on this show constantly, is us both being able to have access to movies. Like, I had to watch this on YouTube, for God's sakes. It was a terrible cut, terrible audio.
Yeah.
Everything. Not the ideal way to watch it. But
I didn't find this streaming anywhere. I just happened to record this off TV like ages ago on a channel that I don't even get anymore. But yeah, we would like to do something written by David. I'm a big fan of David Mamet's writing. I think he's a very, very good writer.
I like Glenn Ross, but I mean, that probably wouldn't be very much of a show if we did that.
No. Yeah, House of Games is always at the top. But I mean, I like a lot of his stuff. Wag the Dog's a pretty underrated movie from the 90s.
Yeah, we've got tons of content, so. Never seen The Edge. I've heard that's good. I think Anthony...
the Alaska movie? You never saw that?
Anthony Perkins.
Anthony Hopkins.
Hopkins. Perkins.
Oh, you've never seen... I've seen that a bunch of times. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend that movie.
Very cool.
It's, Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin. You know, it's a really good survival movie. You know, they crash in the mountains in Alaska. Mm-hmm. It's got a whole epic thing where a bear's coming after them. Oh, it's really good. I really like that movie. I've seen that movie actually a lot of times. So I'm sure you'd dig it.
I don't know why I never watched it. I've definitely had the opportunity, but I never did.
But yeah, I would definitely say it's worth your time if you do get the opportunity again. I'm fairly certain you would enjoy it. Yeah, I really like that movie.
Bart the Bear stars as the bear.
There you go. He gives a crazy good performance. I'll give him credit. He is terrifying in that movie. Holy shit.
And the more like this category, I think I've seen all of those films. Ghost in the Darkness, Instinct, Alive, The World's Fastest Indian, The Gray, and Vertical Limit.
I think it's better than all those.
Awesome.
Although I have not seen World's Fastest Indian. I mean, I don't like Mamet as a person. I think he's kind of a dick, but that kind of goes without saying with a lot of talented writers. But I think he's a good writer. I don't think he like invented dialogue the way he does it, but he probably made it the most popular. I don't know. I'll take David Mamet over like Aaron Sorkin any day.
Mm-hmm.
People love to talk about how clever Aaron Sorkin's dialogue is. No, it's not. You are wrong. I don't care about your opinion. No, I don't. I do not particularly care for Aaron Sorkin's writing style, but I know a lot of people love it, so that is fine. But I've read a couple of David Mamet's plays, although it's been quite a few years. I never actually read Glengarry Glen Ross, the play version. What's crazy is the play version of Glengarry Glen Ross does not even have the Alec Baldwin character or that scene. That was added for the movie, and yet that's like the main thing most people talk about.
Come on, Gil. Oh, yeah. Gil's gonna get it today.
I know, and we're gonna wrap up, but I will just say once again, I just love Jack Lemmon. I think he's just one of the most watchable actors I've ever seen. Everything he does just feels so earnest and everything. That's one of the main reasons why I love the movie. The China Syndrome so much. Yeah, I agree with you, Jacob. I tried watching that. I found it unwatchable. I thought everything sounded so dumb.
Never watched it. I'm
not a TV person anyway, so it's not like I probably would have gotten into it, but I actually found it annoying. trying to watch an episode of that. This was many years ago. But I mean, I don't think it's not something I would have changed my opinion on. I don't think at all.
I never gave it a chance.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really into like that kind of political stuff anyway,
Yeah,
but
me either.
But I mean, I'm not against it. But yeah, I'm just looking. But anyway, we can finish up. So yeah, that's Breaking Away, 1979. Just we thought it would be something just a little bit different. It's sort of a coming of age dramedy or whatever you want to call it. I really enjoy the performances. I really like the tone. I like how the tone changes a bit. It never loses this lightheartedness. It does have some heavier moments, but it never really gets into like really, serious sort of territory. It does follow the beats of a lot of sports movies, but I think it does in a different way because, it has the whole everything is bad moment where, he's lost his faith in his belief in himself, and he's upset about the Italians. He's lost the girl. His friends are mad. He's not getting along with his friends. And then in the third act, everything comes together, and that does all happen. So you could say it's a bit predictable, like a lot of sports movies. But I don't know. It is a little bit different with the biking thing. This is before a bit of like, as we talked about, the BMX craze that would hit the 80s. Yeah, I liked this movie. It just sort of have a little bit of a different flavor to it, I think, than the average sort of sports movie. Give a lot of credit to the cast, who I think are really well done. I like I just like its light, sunny sort of presentation with its bouncy Italian music and everything.
I think that's what makes it so likable is the characters and the actors' performances. I think there's just a great writing and great performance by all those guys.
Right, because they all have like their traits and little archetypes, but they're not complete stereotypes because they all are given at least a few moments to show a bit more of their depth, how they're more like, real people. Whereas a lot of movies, we don't even mind. Like you watch a lot of those sports movies, we don't even mind that the characters don't seem like real people because we just, they're funny or entertaining or like that. But I like that this movie has like a level of more realism to it. I think a lot of sports movies can get away with not having it because that's not really what the audience even wants. You watch something like a lot of those plucky movies about like the team of underdogs that get together that Mighty Ducks did and stuff like that. Like we don't care that doesn't feel particularly real because that's not really what they're talking about or doing, But this movie does feel real. And a lot of it, like you said, had to do with good casting and good performances and writing. It even takes you by surprise because, you watch the first half and his dad seems like, kind of a little bit over the top. But as you get to hear a little bit about his backstory and what he's had to deal with, he actually wistfully talks about his time when he was a stonecutter. You feel for him a bit, he's an older guy. He can't do that. He says, I was young and slim and it was good work and I was proud of it. And, he's kind of not really happy being just some guy in a town doing, a used car dealership, but you do what you do. And he wants to be proud of his son. And he has been a little hard on him. But I mean, that's like so many fathers, right? I don't know, and the end shot that he's been inspired to ride bikes himself, I think is pretty funny, but also uplifting. So yeah, I mean, it's what always gets said about the movie. It's uplifting, it's inspirational, and I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, sometimes movies will have certain reputations and things like that, and I'll watch them and I'll be like, I don't agree at all, but I do. I think this movie pretty much delivers what a lot of people say about it. And it's ironic or interesting to me that like in Roger Ebert's review written obviously in the year the movie came out, he talked about how they don't make movies like this anymore. I think that's even more true now because now if they make movies like this, again, they're just sort of riddled with cliches and they don't have any realism or depth. And that's kind of too bad because sometimes they are about like good or interesting topics that deserve a little more depth put into them. And they usually just come across as like Disney Channel type stuff, if I remember.
I agree.
And that's not always a bad watch, but this is proof that you can elevate that and do it better. Because, I mean, when I think of so many of those other sport movies, like they just would, there wouldn't be anything for us to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
We'd just be like, okay, yeah, they're, I don't know. They like it, but then they lose their passion for it, or then they meet. Like one thing that's good about this movie, one of the big cliches is always you always have to like meet that person that like used to be like an expert or like a really high, really good at the sport or whatever, but now they don't do it anymore and they're bitter and they don't like you or anybody, but then eventually they decide they'll teach you, and that's in so many movies. Like some sort of mentor. I like that there's no mentor in this. This is these are kids growing up and they're relying on each other and themselves. There's no mentor. Like he's a self-taught cyclist. He doesn't have some coach or anything. he looks up to Italians that he only reads about or sees on TV, and then he has this moment of disillusionment where he actually comes face to face with them, and they're what he expected them to be, in that they're great cyclists, but they're also complete jerks. I like that he doesn't have some teacher or coach or anything like that. It's just him and his friends, and when he has his friends help him to relay, again, he's the talented cyclist. They're not, but they gut it out. They put what they can into it to help him win. I mean, that's cool. That's a big part of sports, as we already had the discussion, so I won't repeat it. But I really do like this movie. Definitely, I think it does. I think it has earned its reputation as one of the more uplifting and underrated movies.
Absolutely.
So it was fun having it. It's sort of a bit of a departure from movies that we do here. Although, as I said, the whole point of the show is we try to do movies where we're not just repeating ourselves. Like, we hope that each episode feels somewhat fresh, even when we're following a theme or a series or something like that. But anyway, I do think, compared to all hundreds of movies we've done, this movie does sort of stand on its own as something different, not the usual approach. But it was fun to do. So we are getting close to doing a new series. We're working that out. So it could be as soon as next week, maybe not, but definitely in the near future, next couple shows, we're going to get onto a new series, because we haven't done a series in actually a couple of years now, which is kind of crazy to think of. So we're getting very close to that. So we'll let you know as those details come together.
Absolutely. As always, thanks for watching, guys. We will see you next time.
Thanks for being with us. All right. Peace out, guys. Have a good one.